There we go. Okay, great. Well, welcome to the February 3rd regular meeting of the Los Altos Hills Planning Commission. May I have a roll call, please?
Commissioner Caparis,
Here.
Commissioner Patel,
Here.
Commissioner Smith,
Here.
Vice Chair Washura,
Here.
Chair Indico.
Here. Thank you so much. Okay, now please join me with the Pledge of Allegiance. Be there. Okay. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic
for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Great, thank you. Our first items is presentations from the floor, and this is an opportunity for any member of the public to address the Planning Commission on any subject that is not on the agenda. Please note, however, that the commission is not able to undertake extended discussion or act tonight on non-agendized items. Such items will be referred to staff or placed on the agenda for a future meeting. You'll be given at most 3 minutes to present. Opening presentations from the virtual floor. Cody, do we have anybody?
I don't see anyone raising their hand to speak.
Okay, seeing none, I will now close presentations from the floor. And moving on to item 3.1, which is a resolution to authorize the Planning Commission of the Town of Los Altos Hills to continue the meeting virtually through teleconference meetings and making related findings pursuant to AB 361 with added revision number 1. Do we have a motion?
Yes, I can make a motion.
Great, thank you, Rajiv. Is second? I'll second. Okay, so then we need a roll call.
First, I want to clarify, Chair Indico seconded. Correct? Okay.
All right.
Commissioner Caparis,
Aye.
Commissioner Patel,
Aye.
Commissioner Smith, Commissioner Smith,
Oops, we can barely hear you, Ed.
I think he's muted.
Louder than, okay, yes.
okay, thank you. Vice Chair Washura,
Yes.
Chair Indico.
Yes, with that, the resolution passes. Thank you. Moving on to 3.2, approval of the minutes for the January 13th Special Planning Commission meeting. Does anybody have any updates, comments, revisions for the minutes, or are we good to go? It looks like we are good to go. With that, also, we need a motion.
I so move.
Great, second.
I'll second.
Thank you. Okay, may we have a roll call?
Commissioner Caparis,
Aye.
Commissioner Patel.
I abstain, I was absent.
Okay, abstain. Commissioner Smith,
Aye.
Vice Chair Washura,
Aye.
Chair Indico.
Yes. Thank you. With that, the meeting minutes are approved, and then moving on to our public hearings. Today, we have 3 items on the agenda, and I've been instructed to read the new language for direction. So here it is. Public hearings are specially noticed items for discussion. Anyone wishing to speak regarding a public hearing should fill out a speaker card prior to the completion of the staff report and give it to staff. In this virtual environment, the public should raise the hand icon on Zoom or place a message in the chat window on Zoom, and we will provide you an opportunity to speak at the proper time. Before speaking, please identify yourself by name. The order of business for public hearings is as follows. First, staff presentation. Second, applicant presentation, which is 15 minutes. Third is commission questions and clarifications. Fourth is public comments, and here we'll give 3 minutes per person. Fifth is applicant response, and they're given 5 minutes. And then 6th is commission comments, questions, and action. If you challenge the proposed actions in court, you may be limited to raising only those issues you or someone else raised at the public hearing described below or in written correspondence delivered to the Planning Commission at or prior to the public hearing. Any interested party may appeal the determination of the Planning Commission to the City Council by filling a written notice of appeal with the city clerk by 4 o'clock within 21 days of the decision. A non-refundable filing fee and a deposit for services shall accompany each notice of appeal, except that any member of the council may file such an appeal without payment of a fee. And now I'll ask for ex parte disclosures, and please identify which names are associated with which agenda item. Does anybody have ex parte?
I do not.
Okay, well, I do. I always do. So I, Carol Gottlieb for items 4.2 and 4.3. She's with EDPC, and also Haj of EDPC for 4.3. And that's it. Okay, moving on to item 4.1. This is 27210 Altamont Road, file CUP 21-0003, ATC Sequoia Lands of the Town of Los Altos Hills, a request for a 10-year renewal of the conditional use permit for an existing wireless telecommunications facility with no changes to equipment or structures. And this is being led by our senior planner, Steve Patterson. So Steve, you may start the staff report, please.
Great. Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the commission. So we're looking at a 10-year renewal of a conditional use permit, and it's at the Westwind Barn, which is at 27210 Altamont Road. Just a little background here. Westwind Barn was donated to the town in 1976. This cell tower originally, or this cell site was originally created in 2005. City Council approved this use permit for the wireless facility and included this monopine. So monopine is where it's basically it's a tower, but it looks like a tree, which is actually this is a good location for it. And I'll see some pictures coming up that actually blends in reasonably well for obviously an artificial structure. But it was about 73 feet tall, or 70 to 73 feet tall, and included 9 panel antennas when it was originally approved in 2005, and a little ground, about a 40 by 18 area where the equipment was located in an enclosed area. In 2006, the City Council approved a co-location of T-Mobile on the site, and so they put their antennas about 20 feet down below from the Verizon antennas. So there are 2 providers on this site. The City Council approved a 10-year CUP renewal in 2010. This is at first we were only doing 5-year renewals, and then the state and federal laws changed, so that made it a 10-year renewal was now the minimum. So that was in 2010. So technically it expired in 2020. Now, the reason why it took a while for them to actually submit the application is when they were working with the town to extend the ground lease that had expired or was expiring, and so the City Council granted a 15-year ground lease in July of 2021. So they submitted right afterwards for their 10-year renewal. And also there was some issues with COVID going on and some other things that delayed their actual submittal. But in any event, nothing prevents them from resubmitting or from submitting after the expiration. Our new regulations do require, though, that in most cases, the Planning Commission has to approve it, the extension. But in this case, we're actually asking to be sent to the City Council because it is city-owned property or town-owned property. So the City Council is going to be doing the final approval, and that's a staff's determination on the actual 10-year extension. So just to give you an idea of where we're talking about, Altamont Road, this is Westwind Barn. This is the parking lot for Westwind Barn. So all the equipment is down here in this small area that's basically screened by a substantial amount of landscaping on this side. And most of the screening obviously is for burn preserve and for the homes over there. Obviously the structure and the barn and such, it doesn't provide any screening on this side, and there's no really room to put screening on that side, but you'll see it's a very minimal structure here. And then the tower itself, because it's 70 some odd feet tall, you obviously aren't going to screen that with any type of landscaping. But as you'll see in some of the photographs, it isn't as visible from other locations. Obviously not behind the barn, but obviously from Altamont Road, you'll see in the photos there. But that's to give you an idea where the location is again. So it's right behind the barn here, the tower, and the equipment area is back in here. Here's some photographs. This is standing roughly near the parking lot, looking back towards the barn, and there's the tower in the back here. This is from Altamont Road looking over it. You can see it as in this location, obviously, it was blocked by some of the trees that are existing. So the tower's right in this area here. Here's the equipment area. So you can see it's just a very short wall. It's only about, I think, 4.5 feet tall, maybe 5 feet at the most, that surrounds the equipment. And you can see there's already some other things around here related to the barn. it's not really causing any kind of visual impact clearly in this area. And it's screened on this side. This is from looking at the enclosure. From this side, you can see all the existing landscaping that's there and some additional plants that were planted back in 2005. So it provides a very, very good screen. This is the tower up close on these two pictures on the sides here. And then this is, again, looking from the street, looking over towards, you can see there's a tower sticking out amongst the bushes in the parking lot. And then this is a long distance view from along Altamont Road looking towards the west. So obviously the tower is visible there because it's 70 feet tall, but it does actually provide some screening with it, or it blends in somewhat with some of the trees that are there. So it is not just just sticking out blatantly. So, but the idea is we're keeping all this existing, the socks that are called, that they were put on to make it look like a tree still, and any kind of new antennas that are mounted in the future have to match all the existing that you see out there on the site now. Just a site plan again showing here's where the tower is located, and here's the equipment area, and this is their lease to get in there, their access on this. This is the barn right here, and just a blow up here again showing the barn, the tower, and the equipment area there. This is just an elevation to show you where the levels of the antennas are. This obviously isn't an exact depiction of the actual tower, but it is showing here's the antennas on top for Verizon. Here are the existing antennas below for T-Mobile. And then here's the existing barn in front. The barn's actually slightly taller than this. They just did this as a depiction, again, showing where it's at. And the location, the barn is actually about this tall in reality compared to this picture here. Again, just showing again some of the detail of the equipment. Nothing is being added to the site. All they're asking for is the actual owner, which is now American Tower, is the owner of the tower and the ground lease. They're just asking for an extension of 10 years. So it's not any of the carriers are asking for any new equipment. So this is, again, we separate the ground lessor from the actual users of the antenna or of the monopole and the equipment shed area, So we did send a public notice out to all surrounding property owners on January 21st and posted the site. We have not received any public comments, emails, or phone calls at this time that we received. And so if there's if there's some residents that have some questions tonight, we're definitely happy to take those comments or questions. And so just in my conclusion here, the facility is in compliance with the previous conditions of approval, and the site is well maintained with intact landscape screening from burn preserve. No new equipment is being added. No changes to the monopine or equipment are proposed. The applicant has submitted a site compliance report. This is a report that tells how much radio frequency electromagnetic radiation is emitted from the site, and it is below all the standards and requirements that the FCC has. So they are currently operating. They did the testing of the existing operating antennas and such there at this, I think they did 3 months ago. So therefore, staff does recommend the Planning Commission forward a recommendation to the City Council to extend the use permit for additional 10 years based on the conditions of approval that are in attachment. And that concludes my presentation. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Steve. Does anybody have questions here for staff?
Somewhat tongue in cheek, I may ask, do we have a radiation report on how it affects mountain lions?
We do not.
Any more questions for staff? Oh, I do have a question though. If there is any upgrading of any kind of equipment on there, I assume it would come back to Planning Commission as well as City Council, correct?
It depends. In some cases, if it fits within the silhouette of what's already there and it meets certain criteria in our telecommunications ordinance, then it can just be approved administratively by staff. In fact, this federal law and state laws require us to approve it administratively as long as they're not changing. So in other words, the antennas they're just switching out antennas, or they're adding some small equipment that doesn't change the actual silhouette of the monopine, then that can be approved administratively. And we have done that on several sites. But if they're starting to add another layer of antennas or extending the size of the canopy of the antenna and such, that's when it does have to come back for another review, a public hearing.
Or I have a really controversial question. So if they go from like say 3G to 4G to 5G, does that get a chance to have a public review process?
No, so basically how it works with the next generation technology, basically the FCC has already approved that a next generation can be put out into the in the environment, right? So they've already authorized that you can switch to, say, 5G or add those antennas to your existing equipment and towers. If again, you're not doing what those other criteria are, all we can look at is aesthetics. So we can't manage any of the radiation levels beyond what the FCC is allowed. So if the FCC is granted 5G to throughout the country, which they have, if they want to mount a 5G antenna to this tower, they could do that. As long as it meets all those criteria, we would approve it.
Administratively.
If it doesn't, again, change the silhouette. We can only look at aesthetics. We can't look at radiation. But again, we can require the study and the to see what the emissions are, the radiation. But if it meets the federal guidelines, we cannot restrict it based on that.
Okay, just good to know. Thank you for the clarification. I think it's kind of educational for everybody listening in on this too, so everybody's aware of that fact. So I appreciate you clarifying that.
Yeah, and then just to clarify, they're not doing anything. American Tower doesn't own any of the antennas, so they're not doing any equipment changes based on this 10-year renewal.
Right. Okay, thank you. I guess we don't have an applicant per se.
No, there is. There's an applicant, as in the American Tower, John Merritt, if he's available, if you want to hear from him.
Yes, that would be great, because actually, that would be the time right now to have the applicant make it their presentation and keeping it no more than 15 minutes or less, if they want to be promoted and chime in.
I've prompted Zoom to promote John.
Okay, thank you.
Looks like Zoom is just lagging today.
Yeah, it looks like he's still stuck as an attendee. I'm watching it here.
Yeah, I've clicked promote 3 times.
Oh, no.
Let's try allow to talk. We could ask if he has the presentation.
Okay. Well, I see him as a panelist, so I'm going to say welcome, John. Hopefully you can unmute and we can hear you. Yeah, John, you have to unmute. You're still on mute. And I don't know how you're coming in by computer or cell phone.
If John can't come in, I do think Steve has done an excellent job describing everything. And though I think that he should have the right to make a presentation if he'd like to, maybe we could just have him raise his hand or something to say if he's satisfied that the presentation is out there well enough.
Yeah, or if he can leave a chat, even if he can get into the chat, it depends if he's coming in by phone or by computer. So if he can leave a chat, that would be great to say he's okay with what's been clarified already. Let's see. Yep, I don't see anything there either. Well, I don't have any more further questions. I think Steve did an excellent job covering it all.
Why don't we see if there are resident feedback?
Okay, let me let's see if Dawn can get back in. All right. So now I'll ask members of the public to provide their comments, and please restrict your comments to 3 minutes. Do we have any hands raised for public comment? Oh, we do. Okay.
Yes.
I see it. Okay. Welcome, Sasha.
Hello. Yeah, I actually did not know that this cell tower existed until this meeting. I bike down Altamont every other day or so. So, good job to the people hiding it. That's all.
Okay. Thank you, Sasha. Well, at least we know that promotion worked. I don't know what to say. Anyway, if we have no more presenters, I will then close. Yeah, see no more questions from the commissioners. I will close the public hearing at this point. I don't know if there's really any controversy in any of this. Would anybody have any make any comments, discussion, or are we ready to do a motion?
I'm ready to do a motion, though I would like to just comment, as Sasha did. I'm very impressed with what can be done to obscure a 70-foot tower. Just imagine what it would look like if there was a big metal mechanical tower there right next to all that beautiful rural atmosphere. So I really applaud that that has been done.
Yeah.
And please.
If I might just make a comment. When that tower first went in, we were a little bit worried about the aesthetics. But the world has changed and the barn is utterly dependent on that for safety purposes. With a lot of horses and kids and elderly people falling off horses and wanting to call ambulances and fire brigades. It's really important to have that there. I don't know how the surrounding residents actually ever survived without it. If you have an AT&T cell phone, a reception is kind of spotty there. This tower only supports T-Mobile and one other, I think Verizon is it. But there are people who shall be nameless, but she who must be obeyed has a special cell phone with a T-Mobile connection because of the time she spends up there just to be able to call for help. So it's a pretty vital tower.
Great, good to hear. Any more comments or discussions here? Otherwise, are we ready to go ahead and make a motion?
Can I propose a motion to approve the 10-year conditional use permit renewal?
Okay,
I'll
second.
second that.
Great, thank you so much. So that we're,
Forward the recommendation to city council, I guess.
yeah, it's basically.
And forward it to city council.
Exactly. It's a forwarding the resolution to city council. Okay, so ready for the roll call.
Commissioner Caparas,
Aye.
Commissioner Smith,
Aye.
Commissioner Patel,
Aye.
Vice Chair Washira,
Aye.
Chair Indico.
Yes. And with that, the motion passes and this will be forwarded to city council with our recommendation for the resolutions. Thank you so much for everybody who was involved with that. All right, moving on to item 4.2. And this is 11511 Summitwood Road, file SD 21-0051 and variance 22-0002, lands of Zabrovzik, request for a site development permit for an 832 square foot addition and major remodel to an existing 4,918 square foot single family residence, resulting in a maximum structure height increase from 27 feet to 31 feet 6 inches and no change to the existing building footprint. A request for a variance to allow the existing building footprint to encroach 15 feet into the required 45-foot side yard setback due to the height increase. And our project planner tonight is Jeremy Lowe on this one. And Jeremy, may we have our staff report, please? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Indico. Good evening, Commissioners. Jeremy Lowe, Associate Planner with the town. One moment while I share my screen. Okay, so good evening, everyone. As the chair mentioned, the item before us is a remodel and addition at 11511 Summitwood Road. File numbers SD 21-0051 and VAR 22-0002. The subject property is located basically right at the bend of Summitwood Road. If you can see my cursor, it is the house with the blue roof on this old Google aerial. Here we are a little bit closer. Here is some street views. This is from Summitwood Road. The photographer staff is basically right at the edge of pavement, looking at the house. Here you can see the story poles with the new roof ridges that are proposed in relation to the existing roof. It's a very unique existing roof line shown here. Here's another photograph taken within the property at the top of a equestrian trail easement that is located on the property, so where it intersects the driveway. Here's a photograph of the side of the house. It is currently, suffering from water damage, hence some of the tarps that are on the subject house. But again, note the existing roof lines as compared to the proposed. Here we are at the rear of the house, or essentially the westerly side of the house. Note that the proposed house is going up a couple feet, as shown here. The property can be accessed on this level by a footbridge. Here we are taken on the opposite side of a neighboring driveway, looking at the house. Here we are further down that same equestrian trail easement I previously mentioned, looking at the house through some of the existing vegetation. And here we are even further down, about halfway down the property to the north. As you can see, the majority of the house that's existing is currently obscured by the previously approved pool and pool deck. So here is the subject property site plan, basically showing the existing development on the property. As mentioned by the chair, the proposal will not substantially increase the footprint of the structure, and you'll see that shortly. So the subject property is actually a 1.84 acre lot with an average slope in the high 20s, 28.1%. So that results in a lot unit factor of 1.13. The calculated maximum floor area for the property is 5,757, and the calculated maximum of development area, is 9,280. Based on the plans that were approved in 1991 with the pool deck / pool deck expansion, the existing development area as approved was 13,980. After receiving the application, staff did calculate the existing square footages, using a blue beam and area takeoffs. With the proposed addition, the subject property will go up to 12,709 square feet. So there was less square footage that was actually on the site when staff did the area calculations. And so, as mentioned by the chair, the addition is 832 square feet to the existing 4,918 square foot house. And so they are not exceeding their maximum floor area, The existing residence has a maximum height at one location of 27 feet and an existing maximum height from lowest point to highest point of 31 feet 6 inches. The applicant is proposing increasing the height from 27 feet to the same maximum existing height of 31 feet 6 inches. And this number is incorrect. The maximum height from lowest to highest point is 35 feet as allowed by the town. The existing front setback or the setback to Summitwood Road is basically 100 feet. The existing setback to the south, which would be essentially the shared property line with Bassett Lane subdivision, is 45 feet. Existing setback to the north is 204 feet, and the existing setback to the rear or the west is 30 feet. As mentioned, they are increasing height, and in the town's code, the maximum height is 27 feet. However, it can be increased up to a maximum of 32 feet. For each 1 foot increase, the setbacks must increase by 10%. And so because they are exceeding 27 by just under 5 feet, the setbacks had to increase by 15 feet on the sides and 20 feet on the front. So the proposal, which is a minor addition, will slightly increase the setback to the east with the garage addition. So putting the setback at 96, and then all the other setbacks are actually maintained because they are building generally within the existing footprint. So because of the height increase, they are requesting a setback variance. However, the structure is physically not getting any closer to the property line than would normally be allowed if there was no height increase. And I'll elaborate on that later on this slide. So of course, the applicant is requesting a variance for setback encroachment, as I just mentioned, because of that maximum height. However, do note that because of the steep slopes on the property, again, an average slope of 28%, all of the development is clustered in the southwesterly corner, right, nearest Summit Wood Road. And so because the applicant is trying to maintain that existing setback, they need the height, they need the setback encroachment variance because of that height. What's triggering the actual project itself is the owner wants to remodel and add to the structure to improve the habitability due to water damages. I did include pictures of the water damages in the staff report. However, they are not here in this presentation. I will note that the water damages are extensive. I have never seen so much rot. Even the insulation was rotted. So extensive water damages caused by the original design, which I'll elaborate on soon. So this is the existing first floor. You can note that there is currently a carport here. And then, you know, some bedrooms and interior spaces here. The second floor is shown here with those decks. This line here basically corresponds to that retaining wall here on the first floor. And then there's actually a third floor on this property, which also has 2 decks as shown in those street view photos. And then here is the, over here, excuse me, is the entryway with that bridge that you saw earlier. This is the existing side elevation / front elevation. It's the southeast. So you'll note that the subject property slopes up with the site. It steps up with the topography. And the original design actually has this flat roof here, right at 27 feet. Up the slope, there's this additional, 2-story element here, which actually has a maximum height of 21 feet. So because of this flat roof, as well as all of the uncovered decks, because of this unique roof design, there are no overhangs on the decks. The subject property has suffered a lot of water damages due to standing water. Here is the opposite elevation. Note that you can also step out on the second floor because of the sloping nature of the property. Here is the northeast elevation. So this is the elevation facing Summit Wood Road / facing that trail easement I took photos from. Note again, there are decks here, as well as that large roof, as well as a very large kind of window on 2 floors. And this is that sort of rear elevation or southwest elevation. It's this particular elevation is cut through that pedestrian bridge. So the applicant is proposing enclosing the carport as well as slightly expanding the footprint to create a 3-car garage, as well as removing some of the storage spaces here on the first floor. So cleaning up the front floor facade and enclosing the garage, changing the stairway to more traditional stair than that spiral staircase that I showed earlier. So in general, just improving the habitability. Here on the second floor, again, they are actually closing off those decks as well as straightening the roof, which you'll see in the elevations. And then there's that stairway going down to the first floor. There's an additional stairway back here leading to the third floor. And then here on the third floor, there is a deck along the entire frontage, as well as, again, the change to the stairwell. As far as proposed first floor lighting is concerned, here again is that 3-car garage. This might be a drafting error, but they included 2 wall sconces here. So as far as exterior lighting is concerned, there are 3, not wall sconces, excuse me, recessed down lights. So as far as outdoor lighting is concerned, there are 3 recessed downlights proposed here. The downlights proposed by the applicant and shown on the plans are actually have an adjustable color temperature. And they do show 5,000, or not, excuse me, 550 lumens at 4,000 kelvins. However, it can be lowered to 3,000 kelvins, 2,400 kelvins, or 21. And so it can be assumed that the lower color temperatures will have lower lumens than 550. So these recessed lights do comply with the town's guidelines for outdoor lighting. There's an additional recessed can light shown here in this sort of roof eave, as well as 2 here. And this is the second floor. And then on the third floor, 5 in that upper deck area and 1 over the that pedestrian bridge. So here's the proposed front elevation. So again, note the carport turning into a 3-car garage. And then note the change from that very sharp, sort of a roof slash flat roof to a more traditional shed roof. And so the original roof line is where my cursor is approximately, right? 27 feet. And so in order to avoid that flat roof and prevent future water damages, the applicant is removing all of the uncovered decks as well as the flat roof to create, again, a traditional shed roof and get all the water off of the house. Of course, because of that proposal, they need that height increase, and therefore they need that setback increase. On the rear portion of the property, which was previously, shorter, as 21 feet, they are going up to the town's normal maximum of 27 feet. So right here, they're at 27 feet. And so when viewed from the westerly property line where the encroachment occurs, this structure does not appear to be any bigger than a normally approvable house. And in fact, the house is lower, and so you'll see even less, which you'll see in another elevation. So again, the rear changing as well. You can see the roof line very clearly. Do note that they are proposing a wood textured composite lumber railing. I'll elaborate on that later. So here is that front elevation. So again, or that elevation facing Summerwood Road. So again, that large roof with the 4 uncovered decks and the large opening is being changed to a more traditional building shape and roof line. Because there is that 3rd floor deck, the railing is sort of cut off just so you can clearly see the structure. That 3rd floor is set back from the front of the house. And then note back here on that rear house element that's 2 stories only, there is a row of sort of transom windows, clear story windows to admit light into the house from outdoors. So again, this is the southwest elevation. So this is the elevation where the encroachment occurs. And so again, even though it's nominally a 27-foot height, that's actually measured down to this dashed line here. And so because of the topography, you actually don't even see 27 feet. So here is that site plan. I am showing the required, more or less the 45-foot setback. And so because the footprint is not changing, but the setback is increasing, they need that variance. But again, it's only this corner here, the corner facing Bassett Lane and the west. And again, that part of the house will not appear taller than 27 feet, which we would normally approve. Here, I just want to summarize the town's required variance findings. I don't have staff's actual findings here, but I will summarize my findings. But the first finding is that because of exceptional or extraordinary circumstances applicable to the subject property, including size, shape, topography, location, or surroundings, the strict application of the provisions of this title is found to deprive such property of privileges enjoyed by other properties in the vicinity and other identical zoning classifications. So as mentioned, the topography of the site really clusters the development in that southwest corner. And because the applicant is just trying to improve the habitability of his structure, which is suffering water damages, if we were to strictly apply the setbacks, he wouldn't be able to add that roof and therefore protect himself from those water damages. And so the strict application of the code would deprive the applicant of the privilege of essentially a habitable structure with that footprint, right? Of course, they could always demo and rebuild in another location. However, the applicant has chosen to respect the original topography and the original design. Furthermore, as mentioned, that 27 feet at the back where the encroachment actually occurs is what we would normally allow. And it doesn't even appear to be 27 feet from Bassett Lane. The second finding that the town must make is that upon granting the variance, the intent and purposes of that section of the code, which is the setbacks, will still be served, and that the recipient of the variance will not be granted a special privilege not enjoyed by other property owners. And so as mentioned, the area of encroachment, one, it's the existing setback. And so it's not actually getting any closer to the property. So it's not your conventional setback encroachment where an applicant wants something closer to the property line. But rather they have this 27-foot element, which encroaches to the required setback of that lower part of the house. And so again, the purpose and intent of the setbacks is to protect the neighbors from the visual impacts of the structure. However, the visual impacts are 27 feet, if not less, which we would normally allow. And so, yes, we are granting a variance. However, it's not really from a visual standpoint and from the standpoint of the intent and purpose of the setback ordinances, is not a special privilege. Third finding that the town must make is that the granting of such variance will not be materially detrimental to the public welfare or injurious to the property, improvements or uses within the immediate vicinity and within the same zoning district. Again, as mentioned, the visual impacts from the house will not be greater than your typical house. Even on the downslope side on Summitwood Hill, where there is no setback encroachment, the increased height is within the maximums allowed by the town, both at one location and from the lowest to highest point. And so the granting of this variance, as well as the approval of the project, will not be materially detrimental to the public welfare or injurious to the neighbors. And then fourth, that the variance will not authorize a use or activity which is not otherwise expressly authorized by the zoning district regulations governing this parcel. It's a residential remodel and addition. That is the primary use of the property. So we're not requesting a use that is not permitted. This application was forwarded to the town's Environmental Design and Protection Committee to assess the project property for potential impacts. There was concern that the garage addition may exacerbate the 3-story facade as viewed from Summitwood, where previously there was a carport. Now you'll have a garage door. The 3rd floor deck should have an opaque railing. And so that's where I mentioned that they will have a wood railing, so no glass or anything super reflective. The pool equipment should be enclosed, was a comment from the EDPC. The driveway should be roughened where it intersects the pathway. The town does require new driveways wherever there's a pathway easement or portions of the driveway that's in the right of way that crosses a pathway easement to be roughened due to potential slippery conditions when it rains for pedestrians and people on horseback. The applicant is not proposing to repave or remodel their driveway, as far as I'm aware. However, this would be a standard condition by the engineering department, if that were the case. The committee also commented that skylights, in this case, I believe they meant the transom windows or the clear store windows, should be reduced across the roof ridge line. The application was also forwarded to the Open Space Committee. The committee requests dedication of an open space easement encompassing the areas north and east of the house. Again, there are steep slopes on the property. Again, that average slope of 28%, as well as a slight sort of valley drainage in the topography. And so that's why the Open Space Committee is requesting that easement. However, as noted, it is not a recommended condition of approval because it is a remodel and addition under 900 square feet. The property was publicly noticed. Public notices were mailed to all properties within 500 feet as normal. To date, staff has not received any public comments. And that concludes my presentation. This was a picture sent to me by Commissioner Caparis. So I guess we'll get to this later.
Okay. Thank you very much, Jeremy. Anybody have questions for Jeremy? I do have one question before you. Oh, I was going to ask you, can you just show the variance again exactly? Because when you and I spoke, we were kind of looking at something different. So just that one with the red line showing exactly what it is that's happening. Okay, that one right there, yes. So basically it's because of the other roof further in having a higher height to it. That's what basically prompts that red line to pop up basically 15 feet further in from the 30-foot setback. And
correct. When you increase structure height, you increase the setback for the entire structure, even the portions that aren't exceeding 27.
because the part that's exceeding it is really more interior to the house, is not that front corner, right?
Correct. It's actually this side here, whereas the 45-foot setback line would be somewhere around here.
Okay, yeah, I just was a little confused because when we spoke, we looked at a different elevation and I had a different idea of a wedge.
Yeah, we were looking at this elevation here, I believe.
Right, exactly. I was thinking that. And so now I get it. Okay, very good. Thank you. That's my major question for right now. Oh, also one other thing on the civil drawings, could you just show all the easements? Do you have a civil drawing on this?
I do. That site plan that I showed is from their engineer. Let me just get to the site plan. So
It just there's so many different dotted lines and this and that. This can show all the various, the equestrian pedestrian easement. Okay, there you go. And then I saw there was like a sewer easement.
so there's in red is the equestrian trail easement. Down here,
Here's in red is the easement. Do you mean from there to the property line?
yes, let me complete that circle. So here's the property line here.
You got great hand control because I could not what you're doing.
Yeah, it's hard on a mouse, but I have practice. So that's the equestrian trail easement on the property. And then I started in yellow, but I should probably do orange. Here in orange is a storm drain easement.
Okay, and that comes from the properties above that I saw up there. Yeah, okay. And is there any other like public utility easements, BGE?
So the easement in red, where my cursor is actually, it says what easements are there. It's a PUE, Persima Hills Water District easement and an equestrian trail easement.
Okay, great. Thank you so much for clarifying that. I think this is helpful to know these things. Anybody have more questions here for Jeremy?
Yeah, I have a question. I took a look at the appendix 4, the photographs of the damage that had been done by the moisture in the house. And I wanted to find out, is the house habitable now, or has it been pretty well abandoned until these repairs are done?
I think the applicant can answer that question. I'm not sure if they are living there full time. I did meet the applicant's father on site when I was taking photographs, and he came out of the house. So I'm sure you can probably stay there pretty safely, but maybe not extended periods of time, and definitely not when it's raining.
Thank you.
Okay, Rajiv?
Since this is a remodel, will there be a landscape screening plan later?
So in the recommended conditions of approval, because of the height increase, I did place the landscape screening requirement. We have done that on previous applications where there's a height increase.
Okay, thank you.
And I also saw that you had a condition of approval with the typical exterior lighting being basically 3,000 and less and no more than 600. So hopefully they can control that, because in California, I know you're allowed to have 3,000 or 5,000. I didn't know 4,000 was allowed in California, and 5,000 is that really bright white, which is really harsh on the eyes and for also anything outside. So appreciate that COA of number 9. Any other questions? Okay, with that, we will now ask the applicant to make their presentation and to please keep it to 15 minutes or less. Cody, if you want to promote our applicant, please.
One moment.
Thank you. Oh, he actually put a chat out there. I will show them off in my presentation. So it sounds like he's prepared.
Hello, can you guys hear me?
I
Yes.
will, Asha.
All right, hi. So to answer the earlier question, yes, actually, I am still living here. However, we have learned to adapt to being cold. So here we are. Anyway, let me fire up the screen share and show some pictures and tell a little bit about what we're trying to do. Can you guys see that?
Yes. Thank you.
All right. So this is a long time coming. We'd first started socializing some of these changes among staff and committee a little bit over a year ago. Who are we? So I'm Sasha. My wife is Stella. We got married in 2019, and a few months later, bought a house here in Los Altos Hills with the intent of living here for a long time and raising a family here. We didn't quite realize how much of a fixer-upper it was. The previous owner had actually died, and so there was limited information about the state of the house, and the kids would not allow any sort of invasive investigation of the existing conditions. And so it was all neatly tidied up for sale. So you've seen the house before. It's this kind of BattleBot shaped wedge, and as interesting a design as it was in the 70s, it was maybe not the most well thought out for water closures, and you'll see what that's meant for us here in a moment. In terms of what we actually need to do, most of the exterior sheathing and all of the siding has been severely damaged by prolonged and repeated exposure to pooling water. The roof is aluminum and is approaching its 50-year expected lifespan. And unfortunately, whoever installed it had mixed steel fasteners on the aluminum surface. And so there's considerable corrosion at those interfaces. Like most places in the hills, there's been some settlement, and the extremely large skylights did not take well to that geometric change. And so some of the seals have failed. The balconies probably have always leaked. I can't blame topography or time for their failure. I think they probably failed on day 0. And so in general, the uncovered balconies and the flat roof were just design mistakes on this home back in 1974 and 1975. And I would like to put a single roof plane over both of those features and pitch it so that the structure sheds water with no question, and to also generally simplify the structure to reduce the number of corners and concavities that complexify that boundary and invite damage. I'm a simple guy, and I'm looking for a simple solution. So what does that water damage look like? Here's the east wall of the house. You can see that pooling on the flat section of the roof, and to a somewhat lesser degree at the balcony to roof interface, has caused substantial rotting of the sheathing, as well as significant structural damage. And so we've, as much as we can anyway, since basically all the bedrooms are on the east wall, we can't completely, but we have as much as we can abandoned this side of the building. You can see how severe some of that damage is. So here's some of the studs that hold up the bathroom and the structural beam that defines the top edge of the carport. It's just going to have to be replaced. That wood is basically gone. This is the interior of the master suite. As you can see, the sheathing is gone. Much of the insulation had actually just melted away and had been destroyed by mold. And a number of the studs don't even connect top to bottom anymore. I could probably reach behind me and kick one out to the driveway right now. There's other damage on other walls, just because the sheathing doesn't actually keep water out of the building. And so there's considerable mold on other portions of drywall. As you can see, the skylights leak. And so this is actually an old picture at this point. That's gotten worse this winter. And the balcony design did not shed water appropriately. And so the balconies collected water and rotted out their subfloors. And then also, because the roof line is interrupted at the balcony interface, there's some rather dubious drainage design at that interface that tried to use some electrical conduit as a gutter, and that didn't work very well. And so persistent water flowing down from the large roof surface onto that sidewall on all of the balconies where these interruptions occur have rotted out all of those concavities. And the previous owner appears to have tried to patch it with some cans of great stuff, but that's not really how you fix that problem. And then, of course, once water ingresses into a building, it tends to invite unwanted visitors. And so on the top floor, there's considerable drywood termite damage, and on the bottom floor, there's considerable subterranean termite damage. And so all of these problems basically come back to water entering the structure. One nice thing, however, is that it's a post and beam structure, and all of the interior of the structure is actually in pretty good shape. And so while the exterior walls are going to need some love, the interior structure is quite good. And so I was disinclined to level the entire building and start over. that also probably would have been outside of my budget. So there's 4 of these balconies that have problems. And so I would like to end up with 0 uncovered balconies. So here's the existing roof line. You can see that 27-foot limit leading to the flat roof in the original design from 1975. And I've highlighted where the balconies are. This picture is a little bit out of date. I ended up making the 2 roof pitches the same angle because I was told this looked a little bit weird. So sorry that this line is slightly steeper than was intended. But I wanted to raise that section of roof to optimize the south roof plane for improved solar performance. And then I also wanted to have some space for windows to allow natural light in, since I was planning on eliminating all of the skylights on the structure, since holes in roofs seem like a bad idea. In order to pitch this section of roof and cover the balconies, you see that I need to exceed that height limit a little bit. So going from 27 feet on that flat section to 31.5 feet on the proposed new roof line, in order to maintain a standard height ceiling by the time this intersects the edge of the balcony. This is extra important to me since I'm a pretty tall person. Within the current house, I end up banging my head roughly here. I don't know if you can see my cursor. And so there's a lot of dead to me interior space. And so I tried to animate this to sort of show how the building was changing and how I wanted to simplify the shape. And so that's the profile. And then this is the floor area. So you can see that there's a lot of complexity in the existing envelope. And of course, seams and corners invite failure. And so I wanted to simplify this as much as possible. And it's hard to be much simpler than a cube. So we looked into some other options. One was to stick, oh, sorry, was there a question? Okay. One was to stick within the 27-foot limit, but on the existing 3rd floor, that makes for an unreasonably low ceiling, since there's already sort of an 8-foot ceilings in the building, and therefore a 9-foot plate pitch coming down from there means that I would basically not be able to use half of the top floor of the building. And then the other alternative was to just embrace the flatness and just rebuild with more flat features and just reconstruct. However, I now have kind of a significant distaste for flat roofs, and I don't really want one. And so if we had to do this, I would probably complete the construction and move out pronto. And so that's about it. Does anyone have any questions for me?
Yeah, I do have a question. Where do you plan to put the solar panels on your new design, not on the alternatives?
The intent was on the south facing. I should not use the animated one. On the south facing roof plane.
Okay, are they going to be coming up? Well, they normally do stick up like a couple of feet for the racks and the. So
They will be flush with the roof, so it'll just be the thickness of the panels.
Oh, okay. Well, that sounds good. Great. All right. That was my major question there. Any questions for the applicant from my commissioners?
Well, I just want to commend you, Sasha. It looks like a challenging effort, and I know it's taken a while. I visited there myself to see the situation, and I remember going away thinking that's going to be a challenge, and it looks like you've got some good solutions there. I'm glad to see the alternatives you've considered and what those disadvantages are. It helps drive the solution that you came with. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any more questions for applicant? With that, then I will then ask members of the public to provide their comments, and please restrict your comments to 3 minutes. Do we have any hands raised? Yes, we do. A couple of hands raised. Okay, great. I'll look for Cody to promote our first one. I guess I'll be Carol.
Yes.
Great, Carol, welcome.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Good. The last time I tried it with my new computer, I couldn't be heard. All right. We were sent out to the site. The UPS was asked to review the site. Basically, Steve Padovan said at the time that because of the addition and so much structural change to the inside of the home, that he felt that it should be seen as a major remodel. And so BJ and I visited the site and saw the extensive damage, which was quite something to see. So we have great sympathy for the homeowner and what he is trying to do. The house design more or less has been changed since we were out there. At the time, the balcony was going to be extended out over the thing, and now the third story balcony, I guess, is recessed in with the roof over it. Some of the comments that we had was that we could see an open space easement being applied over the property in the portions of the 30%. We felt that since they were doing it, since we usually ask pool equipment to be enclosed, and it is opposite the pathway, that we thought that should be enclosed, even though it wasn't part of the house project. And if he didn't want to actually enclose it, maybe heavy landscaping could be surrounding it. It's really for noise attenuation, because pool equipment, as it gets older, gets noisier. So that would be part of it. And the other thing would be the lighting compliance. And we are not allowing recessed lighting on the second story. And so I would ask that the recessed lighting not be allowed on the third story, and that scones be used. Thank you.
What was that last word, Carol? Scone?
That's sconces, I'm sorry.
Got it. Thank you.
Thank you, Carol. Okay. Our next hand raised is Charles Knowles. Welcome, Charles.
Hi, welcome. My name is Charlie Knowles. I live at 25725 Bassett Lane and have so for 28 years. It's the property immediately west of the subject property where the lot line encroachment occurs. I just want to say that Sasha and Stella are great neighbors, great citizens, and I have absolutely no objections.
Thank you for that.
Thank you very much. Okay, let's see. Is there any other members of the public with their hands raised? Seeing none, I will bring it back to the applicant to be able to provide any responses to the comments from the public or the discussion so far. And please restrict your response to 5 minutes.
I did promote him. There he is.
Welcome back, Sasha.
Thank you. Yeah, sorry, Zoom takes a few seconds to change roles. Well, thank you so much, Charlie. I really appreciate your vote of confidence and support of the project. And I hope that we won't cause you too much disruption as we try to fix this place up. Were there any other questions that needed to be addressed here?
Errol brought up changing the recessed lights on the third floor, which can shine down into other people's properties, into sconce lighting on the walls of that deck area. Would that be something you might be open to?
I'll be honest, I have been more concerned with the shape of the building and the prevention of future damage, and I sort of just let the architect do whatever he wanted on the lighting. I'm not sure that it's likely that there's going to be any light shining down just because of the angle of the cones of the recesses, as well as how far away they are from the edges and the enormous setbacks on those edges. Also, the fact that the railing, particularly on the east and west side, is opaque.
Ah,
Oh, is the railing solid then?
On the east and west side, it is a solid railing, and so in the 204-foot setback direction, I think it was a cable, but on the 100-foot setback and on the 30-foot setback directions, it is solid.
Okay, that's good to know. All right.
the EDPC also brought up the clear story windows along the top. That's that long horizontal stretch of, I don't know, 15 small windows. I myself do find that as potentially an issue of broadcasting light. We don't choose to regulate architecture, and we don't regulate light in the interior of buildings. But if you felt that too could be mitigated, it might be useful to know if you would be open to changing the structure up there to allow your light in. I understand why you want the light, but is there anything we could do to mitigate the light going out?
Well, so unfortunately, I don't know that there's technology for that. Transparency works in both directions. And I will point out that the written comment from the EDPC actually called out skylights, I think, because of a misinterpretation of the drawing. And I'll point out that I right now have 1,800 square feet of skylight that I'm removing from the design. And so I think we're going to end up with like 30 square feet of the clerestory window, reduced from 1,800 square feet of skyward facing skylight at a 45-degree angle. And so already I think the impact is dramatically reduced from
You
the
make
existing.
a very good point. Thank you.
Yeah, because what is the dimensions of your transoms? Because there's 13 transoms. What's the dimensions of them?
I don't have the drawing in front of me. I believe that they are 3 square feet, so 1 foot tall, 3 feet wide.
Yeah, I was just looking at it more from the cost expense from your sake. I was thinking you've got 13 there. If you were to take it down a little bit of number, you still get your lights, but also it's very expensive with 13 separate windows.
The sum total cost of those windows is less than the variance application fee.
Okay.
So yeah, to clarify, they are 3 feet by 1 feet, and there's 13 of them. So that would be 39 square feet.
Okay.
But as Sasha pointed out, it's a fraction of the skylights he currently has.
Exactly. And no more holes in the roof also. So that's good. The only other question that I was going to ask you too, because I know between the Open Space Committee and also with EDP, which are respected committees in our community here, you've got an equestrian pedestrian easement kind of going there, which is a great connection to the Roos Ridge Open Space Preserve. And I had a chance to walk there. It was actually really a great discovery that you have that there. And as part of our wonderful pathway systems that we all enjoy here in Los Altos Hills. And I was wondering, as far as if you would be open to putting an open space easement over the existing easements that are there, because they're already identified, but mainly just to create more uniformity. Because what we do here is we look at parcels by parcels. And I figured this parcel, since you're going to be doing such an extensive remodeling, fixing it, it'll probably never come back before our city for probably another 20, 30 years, because you're going to do such a good job of it that it's not going to have to come back for anything. maybe for a remodel of the pool, but nothing else. And I was looking to see if you could, be amenable to having an open space, because that's one thing that we do request for any major projects going through, even if it's, a major remodel, to be able to protect that portion of land with a little bit more up-to-date terminology, which is open space easement versus equestrian and pedestrian, which would still be there, but doing some kind of overlay to protect that area and also the ravine next to it.
I would tend to want to just avoid poking that bear.
Okay, mainly because we've had many people, like I said, I look at parcels, I don't look at anything else, and mainly just being consistent with all our parcels. But okay, thank you for your response. Any more questions for our applicant? Okay, seeing none, I will then close the public hearing and bring it back around to our commissioners. Thank you so much.
Thank
Sasha.
you.
So I now close the public hearing and bring it back to our commissioners. I do have a little bit of a slide presentation that I was hoping to kind of share, especially given the fact that maybe some of you guys didn't have a chance to go out and walk that property. If I may share a screen and just kind of put it out there, because I think my part of understanding the house and all that, I think we've had a very good presentation, both by Jeremy and also Sasha, the scope of the project and what's being done. The only other thing I had was the blatant comments that were put forth by Open Space Committee as well as EDPC. So if I share my screen. I just wanted to kind of recap, on the left here is what Open Space had submitted in the report that we saw in the attachments with the report from the Open Space, and that's a lot of open space there. And then here in the middle, what I did was I put a blue line where Jeremy put the red line of the existing equestrian and pedestrian easement, which connects basically the Summitwood Road area down here, going north actually, which is actually going downhill to the Roos Ridge Open Space Preserve. And it's a really nice pathway. I was really pleasantly surprised, and it's a nice, part of our pathway system. My thoughts here, because like I said, I wanted to be kind of consistent with the blue line, which since this is already an existing equestrian pedestrian easement, just to kind of overlay the existing easement with an open space easement here, but also just bubbling out just a little bit to also include the grove of oak trees, which is here. There is a rather steep swale going right through here and just kind of encompassing that. So I'm trying to overlay and then not going all the way up beyond the driveway because, it's kind of following a little bit like what open space easement. So that was my thoughts there. And I'll show you why I was thinking this. I feel this property, and for those who didn't get out there, walk. So here is from the top of the driveway. So we're at the southern part of the property, and you walk down the property along here. This is the equestrian pedestrian pathway, and it continues on down this way here. And then it continues on down here like that. So I try to make it logical. If you are standing from the pathway, like right down here and looking back at the house, you'll see here's the pool structure. And also that's where they have the pool equipment too, which we were talking about sound attenuation. But that's the view from the pathway back to the pool area, and the house is sitting right up here. If you are at that area of the pool right there and standing looking back at the pathway, you'll see the pathway is right in here, tucked in with native bay trees as well as oak trees. Mainly bay trees are at the top and oak trees are further down. If you continue further down, it basically you continue going down here, and then standing at the base of the property, which is a northern border, kind of with my back to the Roos Ridge Open Preserve. Looking up, you'll see here the story poles of the house, and it's nicely tucked in, especially with all these vegetation of oak trees down here. So as you start going back up from the northern property, I figured I'd give you a tour going back up, walking back up this way, and then continuing here, you'll see there's a grove of oak trees here. And then also you'll see the steep swale going down this way. And then you continue walking up, and the house is sitting up there. You can see a little bit of orange, but you'll see the pathway goes this way, and you've got a rather healthy swale that goes down here, which needs to be protected from anything anyway. And then you continue going up here to where you get up to the driveway area. So I try to make it logical as far as, so the pictures hopefully tell a story. It's a beautiful piece of land, and that's why I wanted to figure out if we could propose a compromise of doing an overlay of an open space easement on the equestrian pedestrian easement, and also just kind of encompassing the oak grove as well as the swale, because they're protected by being riparian habitat and, you know, having native things, and then letting the enjoyment of the rest of this property go to the homeowner to put whatever he wants in there, from vineyards to fruit trees to whatever else. But here is already quite a nature path already created. So that was my thought. And with that, I will stop sharing. So that was my big takeaway of looking at this, as far as, since we only get a chance to look at these parcels every 20 to 30 years when they come through, this is the one and only opportunity we have for this one. And also to remind my fellow commissioners too, that we just reviewed a property on Newbridge, which all they were doing was remodeling a basement and adding a pool. And we placed an open space easement there along the top of bank and the creek that was running along Barron Creek over on La Paloma.
I think they were adding more than 900 square feet.
Excuse me?
They were adding more than, I think there's a threshold of 900 square feet that causes us to do site development.
Well, the thing is, the Newbridge was remodeling the interior of that basement. They were not adding on more square footage, really. It was, Jeremy would know.
Yeah, so to remind the commissioners, the New Bridge project was for a new pool requiring a grading policy exception. That's why it came before the commission.
But we still put an open space easement there because the top of bank and the creek there too.
Correct. There was a creek on the property.
Right. So anyways,
Well, let me just say, I personally don't think we should encumber this property any further. I don't like the idea of setting a precedent that for every time we see a property that has a pathway easement on it, that we now want to overlay an open space easement on top of it. I don't think that's necessary. I think that's over encumbering the property for protection that's really not necessary, because they can't do anything on a pathway easement anyway. I think this property has done quite a bit for the neighborhood with the equestrian easement and the water easement and I think there's a third drainage easement. And ultimately, I feel like this property is here for a variance request. That's it. And in terms of adding square footage, it's very minimal. And there's so much work that this home requires that I'm inclined, and I do recognize that it is a variance request. There is something out of the ordinary to it, but I think a lot of work has gone into developing solutions here. He could have fixed all of this and made this house just the way he wants it if he wanted to take the expense of moving it somewhere else on his property. But that's way too onerous of a requirement. I think that the fact that the next door neighbor has supported the project and that the view from the next door neighbor, that envelope hasn't changed at all. And all of the other improvements that are going on, I'm not sure. I thought the blue roof was a bit startling, and I think that he's probably not going to put another blue roof up there. And
are we still on questions or making statements?
I thought we were in discussion.
Yeah, we closed the public hearing. This is our discussion time, Yitzi. So
okay, now the last thing was questions, but go ahead. It's just when it came to the blue roof, I'm saying, yeah, I want to talk about that.
Yeah. And it's been there for a while in this condition with the tarps there. And I think that it will do good for the whole neighborhood to have these improvements done. And I think that for myself, when I look at variances, I was taught by a wise person whose initials are JC, that that when variances come before, you ask, who's it good for? Is it just good for the resident? And in this case, I find that though it is good for the resident, I think that it's also good for the neighborhood to have this home be improved and put back in a good condition.
I do have a question for Jeremy in regards to what you said, Jim, about pathway easement, because it's considered a equestrian pedestrian easement. Is it also, Jeremy, considered a pathway easement since it's on a pathway map?
So to clarify, it's on the actual property, it's called an equestrian trail easement, ETE. In the past, we distinguished between pedestrian easements and equestrian trail easements. And the only difference is that this one allows horses while the others don't. Today, they're basically interchangeable. It's basically a pathway easement, so.
Thank you for the clarification. All right, great. Yitzi, Rajiv, Ed, who's next?
Yeah.
Go ahead, Yitzi.
Yeah, Jeremy, if you could bring up that one slide I sent you. This house has been the subject of deliberations of this committee extensively in the past. But for reasons which I think this picture shows, there used to be a time when we didn't have metal roofs. And this was one of the first flagrant displays of metal roofs in town. And somebody who was on the planning commission at that time said, my God, is this a rural atmosphere? And directly as a result of this structure, we took a long look at the colors that we allow for roofs. We used to say just 50% reflectivity or something. And since then, we had a long discussion and debate. We looked at the official camouflage colors that the federal government recommends and so on and so forth. So I've been familiar with this house for a long time. This picture, in fact, was taken in 2016 before the current applicant owned it. And it's been a sore thumb in the face of a lot of town residents ever since. Which brings me to the current application. When I saw it, I thought, first thing I'm going to do is see what the color of the new roof is going to be. And it says on the drawing somewhere, see the color board. And I didn't have a color board, but I'm going to just assume that the new roof is not going to be this kind of blue, because that I think would require some kind of variance or permission or something. Let me get back to the overall situation here. I agree with Mr. Mashura. The applicant is before us for a variance to do with the height. That's the only reason he came in. And we've got to be careful when somebody comes in by saying, aha, I got you now. And we are going to demand more to be squeezed out of you than you actually came here for. So I'm always sensitive to that. We do actually set a parameter of 900 square feet in certain circumstances. But the variance before us is a height variance to do with it triggered a setback increase from 30 to 45 feet. And when push comes to shove and you look at it from the direction of where this 45 feet is being exceeded, it's only a one-story building. The visual aspect from that angle is one story. It's 3 stories on the other side. But from this 45-foot requirement, it is barely 1 story. So at that point, I say, let's understand that that's the situation. It's really much ado about nothing in terms of actual impact in the real world as opposed to numbers on a sheet of paper. But there's some other aspects. The applicant could have redone his building at much greater expense, probably, and not triggered any kind of extra requirement. But he chose to save as much of the building as possible and not putting it all into the trash heap and recycling pile, but rather save the old building and make a decent job of it. And I must compliment him. This is about, I've thought about this a long time, ever since I looked at it many years ago, how the heck you could turn this into a reasonable Los Altos Hills rural environment, doesn't stick out like a sore thumb kind of house. And I think a masterful job has been done. So I looked at it from a net improvement for not just the neighborhood as a whole, but a lot of the town, people who just drive past. I remember the first time I drove past this house that I remember, it was early or late in the 1990s. And it really is one of the biggest violators in our town, I feel, from its aesthetic, or fits into the feeling of Los Altos Hills, for want of a less exact term, and saving the old. Also, we don't comment on the architecture, but the old architecture was very much a thumb in your eye. The new architecture is a much simpler envelope, perhaps a more conventional envelope. The net gain to permit this one small infraction of a 45-foot setback, I think, is a wonderful bargain for the town. And I'm just glad that the applicant has come up with this solution, because I couldn't think of a solution that more fits in with what we as the town would like to have. And I've probably got some other points, but I'll leave them at this point. Oh, the clearer story. Recessed lights and light emission and light coming in. We have other houses with clear stories. And one of the ways you achieve, I think, what we would like to achieve is to have any light emitting unit, i.e. a lamp without a shade on it, be below the level of the clear story. If it's recessed in a ceiling, that's fine. But if it is a light where you could actually, in the olden days, we would say, see the filament or see the actual LED, as opposed to light reflecting off a surface like a wall or a ceiling, that would go a long way to limiting the amount of emitted light from that clearer story. So it's a question of internal lighting being lower than the bottom edge of that clearer story, if you will. So the light going out is really a reflection of the sloped ceiling. Similarly, the light on the quote deck, that used to be a deck. It's still a deck technically because it's open, but it's got a railing and it's got a roof over the top. So it's really emitting no more light than a room with a large window. So I can't get too excited about the light emission either on the deck or through the clearer story. Yeah, I'd like it to be minimized, but it's not something I can get hot under the collar about. And with that, I'll subside.
Okay, thank you, Itzi. Rajiv?
Okay, yeah, Miss, when I looked at the plans and I've visited the property also, I felt that the applicant has done a wonderful job in coming up with something which is tucked in well on this site. There are lots of mature trees all over, which reasonably screen the property. Of course, some of it can be improved. But I felt that this height increase was tucked in very smartly without being very, obstructive to the neighbors. And from the road, it's hardly noticeable if the height were a little bit higher than what it is right now. So overall, I'm very happy with the plans. Even the lighting, I'm always for recessed lighting over wall sconces. Wall sconces are evil, okay? And it goes back to what we just heard from Yitzi. Wall sconces, you can see from far away, straight through, regardless of the filament or not, the entire structure can be seen. And that is much more offensive than down-facing light, which only diffuses into the environment. So I always prefer downlight compared to wall sconces. So I don't see any concerns. And this is a enclosed balcony, so it's even going to be less so with a solid, a railing and for the balcony. So I don't see a big issue with that either. The one question I was going to ask Jeremy, if possible, is since, we saw in the pictures Brigida showed some creeks or swales, whatever you call it, in future, if there has to be some, I would say construction, let's take a simpler example, like a fence. Would there be any restrictions due to the creek where you can and cannot add certain type of structures?
So the subject property doesn't have, at least on the town's maps, a creek itself. This is a drainage. It's a very nice swale, which could be a tributary to a creek, maybe further down, maybe by Roos Ridge. However, on the actual subject property, we don't have a creek with a defined top of bank. So there wouldn't be a setback which precludes structures on this property. The easement itself, the trail easement, definitely we wouldn't allow anything in it, but the little swale is actually just beyond it, right around where my cursor is.
Okay, so there are no restrictions for swales.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
Okay, so other than that, I just wanted to get clarification there, but I would definitely say that what is from a structural perspective done is quite intelligent and smartly done, and I would not have any issues supporting the applicant's proposal.
And Rajiv, what do you think about the open space easement doing a smaller abbreviated version?
I think if the property were, applicable for review, then I would have considered it. But I don't want us to start policing properties where, at least by our rules, you're not supposed to review certain items, because otherwise it's going to become really complex for us going forward. I'll give you an example. Why does an applicant make a 9,990 square foot home? Because they don't want it to be called an estate home. Now, you cannot go and say that, aha, because you're 9,990, I'm going to call it an estate home and put some extra restrictions on it. So we have some rules in town, and whether we like it or not, we'll have to respect some of them. So
you might call it a slippery slope.
Yes, that is essentially the. And by the way, I also have a big issue with that estate home number, because it's a cliff like everything else. 900 square feet is here, 10,000 is there, and people try to be on one side for a purpose. And I've seen a lot of applicants do that and get away with what I would consider horrible things.
Okay. Ed Smith, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
You want to chime in?
I don't think so. I really don't have any strong feelings that have not already been expressed. I think, as one of the commissioners mentioned, this is a variance application for a height increase on the house, and it causes an encroachment into a particular easement, which is of no concern to the neighbor. So let's not pile a whole bunch of other stuff like open space easements on top of it. Let's go ahead and rule on it and get on with it.
Okay. Can we stop screen sharing, please? It's so hard for me to watch everybody. Thank you. Thank you for doing
Yeah,
that.
I have some extra words when it.
All right, Yitzi, because yeah, I think everybody said their piece.
Yeah, I'd like to hook in a little bit on that swale again. I'm not sure how many commissioners here were on the planning commission, but a little while back we looked at a redevelopment, if you will, on the Bassett Lane, which is just above this property. Bassett Lane used to go all the way through to Summit Wood Road. We chopped off Bassett Lane at some point and made just a trail in between. I think it's still a fire road. And at the point that we did that work on the properties on the other side of Bassett Lane, just south of this property, we paid a lot of attention to water runoff because it had to cross the end of Bassett Lane. And I remember there was a big culvert there. And we spent a lot of time worrying about that culvert, which, if I remember correctly, was at what is now the end of Bassett Lane and the start of the trail. So there is quite a bit of water that we looked at before coming down the hill from up above. So that's not just a swale because occasionally there's water, but I think in a normally wet year, it gets pretty wet there. I just wanted to
Also,
comment.
I just saw it,
What?
Yitzi, I was going to tell you, I saw it when I was there on the property. I looked up and that whole swale area above this property is now lined with like quasi big boulders kind of going all the way up with ramps of
Yeah, there
logs.
was a
It's
lot
like
of erosion and flow at that time. The
Yeah,
other
but it's
point
just
I
the way
wanted to make,
it's
which,
engineered.
go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say the way it's engineered above, I'm wondering how much water comes rushing off the above property and goes down, because I don't know how much gets captured because the way they did it with their boulders, but that's a different property. But I was a little concerned when I saw that out there.
Well, I think we were trying to slow the momentum of the water. It was all being collected further uphill, channeled into a narrow swale, and we put the boulders there to take away some of the momentum and spread it out a little bit and slow it down. Somewhat in a, let's say a semi-humorous vein, we got two houses next door to each other, which contribute differently to Los Altos Hills. Next door is Charlie Knowles. That's a dangerous place to be because there are all kinds of wild cats sometimes hanging around there. If you are a fancier of wild felines, of any, not just local wild felines, but rare wild cats, that house is kind of responsible for a lot of their preservation all over the world. Now, this house, on the other hand, is dangerous because it's introducing the concept of high gigabit rates. I don't know what the progress is, but there is a movement afoot to bring fiber to that house. And so I applaud that as well as a contribution to the community. Comcast is not very good up there. Trust me, it's out of out of the boonies. So when fiber comes through there, as I hope it will, kudos to the resident there who's put so much work into making it happen. That was just an aside. Cats, and which are nature, and fiber 50 gigabits, which is future, right next door to each other. Rather wonderful.
I'm sure the cats will enjoy the internet speed. Okay.
Well, with that, can I propose a motion?
Yeah, I think we're pretty much, I just wanted to get a good reading from everybody to know where everybody's heads are at. Like I said, I state the obvious sometimes and I put my neck out, but I just want to make sure I put it out there so we get to talk about it. So thank you
I
for.
think I would have thought more about it, Brigitte, but the property's average slope is 28%. So this isn't like a 40, 50% slope type situation.
More in that one area, just preserving it for future Sacramento rules too, because Sacramento 20, 30 years from now, we don't know what's going to happen. I'm just trying to be protective of any parcel. It has nothing to do with the homeowners at all. It's
Yeah.
parcel by person. I am consistently the same opinion on all these parcels. As people who know me know that I'm always the one very conservative and trying to protect what we have in town. And
Well, I really do value that there are already easements on
the fact that
all
great
the other reasons.
And I was laughing because he has a chat here. He challenges anybody. He'll bake cookies for the first person to ride up the horse up that path. I'll tell you, I've seen horses ride up steeper paths, and you know what? You may have to make a couple of dozen cookies because Horsemen's Association is a big group, and they will.
That's right.
Taking
I'm
you up
sure
the
Elisa Brito would be able to ride a horse right up.
I've seen it done. So
Well,
anyway.
with that, may I propose that we adopt the resolution that is in our packet as attachment 1 to approve the variance and for the subject to be listed, oh, pardon me, the variance, subject to the listed findings and conditions of approval in the packet. Did I slice that up too badly there, Karen?
I'll second that.
Okay, so we're ready for a roll call.
Commissioner Caparas,
Aye.
Commissioner Smith,
Yes.
Commissioner Patel,
Yes.
Vice Chair Washura,
Yes.
Chair Indico.
Yes. And with that, the motion passed. Congratulations, the project is approved pending a 21-day appeal period. And Sasha, go make some cookies for the Horsemen Association. Great. Moving on to item 4.3. It's the Town of Los Altos Hills SP 19-0007, an update to the town's existing outdoor lighting policy to provide additional guidelines, clarifications, and definitions. And we have our project planner, Jeremy Lowe. Jeremy, would you care to start the staff report, please?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Good evening again, Commissioners. One moment while I share my screen. All right.
You're not in the, oh, okay, you fixed it. Thank you.
So the item before us is the update to the outdoor lighting policy. The photo here is just an example, albeit a bad one. However, I didn't want to use a specific house from the town. So that was a Google image. So just a little bit of background. The town of Los Altos Hills does have an existing outdoor lighting policy, which was approved by the city council in 1997 and amended in 2012. The current outdoor lighting policy states that its purpose is to assure that the open and peaceful character of the town is maintained, that adequate lighting is provided for the enjoyment of outdoor use areas, lighting does not intrude on the privacy of neighbors, light pollution is reduced, and that the glare is minimized onto adjacent properties. The current outdoor lighting policy basically provides guidelines on the location of outdoor light fixtures, as well as what types are allowed or discouraged. you know, planning sees a lot of site development applications where there is outdoor lighting that is proposed, and especially outdoor lighting in landscape screening plans. And so we have a set of guidelines which we generally require applicants to follow. However, you know, it is due for an update. It was last amended in 2012. And as noted by the chair, the file number is SP19. So we actually created this file number in 2019. It's been kicked down the road because of priorities caused by Sacramento. So on March 9th of 2021, the Environmental Design and Protection Committee voted to refer their draft of the outdoor lighting policy updates to the Planning Department for review. On July 1st of 2021, staff introduced this outdoor lighting policy update to the Planning Commission. At that first sort of introductory meeting, it wasn't a public hearing, staff was instructed to research other lighting policies for potential additions to the proposed update, because at that point, we were simply going with what the EDPC had proposed. It basically aligned with what we had been doing for the last, you know, many years, at least as long as I've been in the town. So on October 7th, we came back with our discovery. We had looked at the lighting policies and ordinances of 11 other jurisdictions. And basically, we found that any jurisdiction that did have a lighting policy or ordinance on the books had similar goals, right? They wanted to remain dark skies compliant, limit or eliminate any lights going off the property. And they actually, most of them set limitations on maximum color temperature as well as emitted light. Some jurisdictions use lumens like we are proposing, and other jurisdictions used foot candles, which is a different measurement of light on a certain area, usually measured in feet, square feet. So just to catch everyone up, we've been recommending policy updates which align with the guidelines that we have been using in site development applications for years. Basically, we're amending our current policy to include additional guidelines on placement and types of lighting allowed or discouraged. Currently, all we say is no uplights, right? It also includes language referring to the amount of glazing on garage doors. This has come up many times in recent years. You know, several applicants have proposed garage doors that are almost entirely glass. And even though we don't regulate interior light, these are, you know, very heavy light polluters. The recommended policy update also includes limitations on lumens emitted by outdoor light fixtures and limits on the color temperature of outdoor light fixtures. Again, we've sort of been doing this for years, however, it hasn't been official policy. And so we are simply amending that. The update also includes language for party/event lighting as well as seasonal lighting. We currently don't have anything related to, say, how long you can leave up your Christmas lights or something like that. And then we added definitions and terms that are used in this update. So yeah, pretty straightforward. I'm going to quickly go through everything for those who have not read the packet and are joining us tonight. But basically, we've added some definitions on several terms that are used throughout our new policy. And you can see them in the draft, but basically we defined what we call glare or light pollution, i.e. light that goes past the property line, different types of lighting. With regards to glazing on either the light fixtures themselves or on garage doors, we define transparent versus translucent or opaque, as well as opacity. So as far as the guidelines are concerned, we basically are limiting the number of lights on the exterior face of structures to be essentially one per doorway / opening. So 2 for like a main entrance or a double door or flanking garage doors. Basically, the policy is for approximately 1 light per doorway. Of course, as a policy, there's always room for exceptions. Additional lights should only be placed in locations where the director or the commission determines they are necessary for safety. So pretty consistent language with what we've been doing in the past already, just making it official. Stating that all light fixtures should be fully shielded and directed downward. So kind of elaborating more on no up lights, right? So this is dark skies compliance right there. Oops, excuse me. Basically limiting pathways and driveway lighting. So these would be landscape lights to no taller than 18 inches. That was originally proposed by the EDPC. I'm sure the commission saw that the EDPC actually has commented on these guidelines and do have some amendments or clarifications. I believe they say that majority of light fixtures actually do have 22-inch options as well. So they wanted to change that language, but more on that later. But basically, again, we don't want lights to be very close together to create some kind of runway appearance. So if lights are flanking a walkway or driveway, they should maybe alternate sides or just be spread out very far. And that the step lights on walkways or steps or on retaining walls should be louvered and not just shining straight out. We also said that the accumulation of many light sources in small concentrated areas should be avoided. Again, we've been doing this, right? If you recall that new bridge project that we alluded to on the previous item, they had an outdoor dining area, which originally had 10 downlights. We asked the applicant to reduce them to 6 just to limit the accumulation of light. So again, this is just stuff that the department and the commission has been doing. We're just trying to put it in writing. Prohibiting recessed lights in second floor roof eaves where they are not located over a balcony or deck. So where there is an outdoor space, right, we need to provide lighting. We need to allow for lighting for safety purposes. So no recessed lights in just roof eaves that are washing a wall or something like that, right? It has to be for an outdoor use. Recessed lights in first floor eaves shall be located over entryways, garage doors, and patios only. Again, we don't want wall washes. And they should be positioned in areas where the light cone does not shine down into neighboring properties. As previously mentioned, the EDPC does want to amend this to include all floors, especially second floors. Garage doors may not emit light from a maximum of 30% of their surface area. And so the light transmitting windows, panels, or other materials shall be translucent, allowing for no more than 30% of the interior light to pass through. So you can either have only 30% of the garage door glazed, or it needs to be treated in such a way that only 30% of light escapes the garage door. Spotlights and floodlights should be installed only for security and safety purposes only.
Pardon me, Jeremy, would you explain that one section again on the 30%, the application of the 30%?
Yeah, so how I'm reading this is, again, these recommendations come from the EDPC and staff generally agrees with them. So how I'm reading this is that the garage door may only have 30% of the area glazed, or if there's more than that, only 30% of the interior light can pass through it.
That's not how I read that, but yes, I understand what you're saying.
Okay, we can always clarify it, and the commission can before sending it to the council. So spotlights and floodlights should be installed only for security purposes. They shall be limited in number, installed with a timer or motion sensor, and directed away from clear view of neighbors. Shielding with shrouds or louvers is recommended. Pretty straightforward. High intensity discharge lighting such as mercury vapor, high and low pressure sodium, and metal halide lighting is prohibited. and that the maximum color temperature of all lights should be 3000 kelvins or below. Any light beams shall not exit the property. Uplighting of any kind, wall wash lighting of exterior walls and LED lighting strips are prohibited.
Jeremy, quick question on the spotlights and floodlights. Do we have any restrictions or maximum intensities?
So our current code actually does say they are prohibited unless required for safety.
Right, but even for safety, can they be super, super bright? Because anybody can suggest that it's for safety. Is there a maximum, lumens or some brightness to it?
We have not set one for spotlights or safety kind of floodlights.
Okay.
Generally, those are pretty bright. Those aren't the same kinds of fixtures an applicant would propose for architectural reasons. So that is something that we can look into and maybe see what an industry standard is for those. Does that answer the
And
question?
those have to be explicitly, permitted, right, by the applicant. Some applicant cannot just install, say, safety lights because it's important without, let's say, a permit. Is that right?
Yes. So if they're not shown on the plans, when I go on my final inspection and I see a floodlight, I do point out that it's not permitted and needs to be removed. It hasn't happened actually so far since I've been in town, and I've done dozens, if not hundreds of final inspections. So generally applicants are pretty good about whether or not they really want floodlights. Or
unfortunately, applicants are very good, but 90%, 99% of the times you only find a safety issue once you start living in a house. And by that time, the staff and the city is long gone. So
Sure.
That's my concern. Anyway,
Sure.
Please continue.
And, I will note that again, you are correct. Most residents aren't aware of potential dangers or coyotes or mountain lions until they've started living in the house.
Right.
We do have some applicants who are from the get-go worried about that and have actually proposed those lights. So yeah. Moving on, one of the most important components of this lighting policy update is to actually put down in writing these limitations on lumens and color temperatures that we have been using for probably about 2 years now. In past years, we were using wattage to limit lighting, and we quickly found that wattage isn't a good metric for assessing light, because sometimes low wattage fixtures can still be very bright, and some very high wattage fixtures have nothing to do with brightness, right? That could be the timer, that could be other technology in the fixture itself. So yeah, we've basically set limitations on most exterior lights on structures to be 600 lumens, because generally those are for outdoor spaces by entryways or doors, and so you need a little bit more light. But in the actual landscaping for your path lights and your step lights, we have much lower maximum lumens. We found that most step lights are in the 110 or lower range. I've seen 82 a lot. In fact, I've even seen 37. So yeah, 110 is on the higher end for a step light. Path lights, we generally find them below 200. As far as color temperature is concerned, I think Brigitte alluded to it earlier, Chair Indico, excuse me. But the lower kelvins refers to a kind of a warmer color temperature. So 2700 kelvins would be more like your yellows, your kind of warmer lights, whereas 3000 is approaching, more of a white kind of LED type lighting. And of course, 35, 4000, 5000, those are your pure white lights, which we are prohibiting. As continuing on new guidelines, we've created sections related to tree lights. In recent years, we've been seeing a lot of applications with lights hanging from trees or fixed to tree branches, shining down. You know, people do want to show off the nice canopies or at least the branches of trees. We understand that. So we are allowing downlighting from trees. However, lights should be minimal in number. The sources should not be visible from off-site, and that the fixtures are shielded and directed downward. And they have to be near or for outdoor use areas. So you can't just put a downlight in a tree very far off and near your property line, right? EDPC did add that they want to actually limit this to 2 lights per tree. Furthermore, bistro lights, pendant lights, or any other kind of hanging lights that don't have like covers or can swing in the wind or whatever, those are prohibited. So normally these would be like the fixed kind of down lights that are directed and pointed downwards from a branch. Lighting within setbacks, it's in our actual municipal code. However, we've included it here. So that's more like a one-stop shop for people interested in outdoor lighting. Lighting within the property line setbacks is limited to 2 fixtures only, except where the planning director or planning commission determines that they are necessary for safety. This is actually the only place where we've actually deviated from EDPC. Their comments are actually to limit it only to driveway lights, and that's generally where you see it. However, we wanted to leave it open for some applicants to say not have driveway lights, but to allow for 1 or 2 lights in their setbacks closer to their house. All lights within property line setbacks shall be fully shielded. This includes any lights on gates or within the setback. Lighting for recreation areas. This is also in our code, but again, one-stop shop. Lighting is not prohibited on tennis courts, basketball courts, bocce ball courts, or any other recreation or sports. Those types that are mentioned are the most common ones we see in town. However, just in case, we've included a little bit of, you know, room, wiggle room.
Jeremy, may I ask you a question about that?
Sure.
Does that mean like overhead lights shining down on the courts? Or for instance, bocce ball, could one still have like pathway lighting around the bocce ball court down low and still allow a game of bocce ball after dinner?
So we've been interpreting it. Again, we've been sort of doing these, even though they're not codified or in a policy for years now. We've been basically saying no lights at all for sport courts, because the point is to limit that sort of nighttime use and potential noise generation. So, you know, it's kind of, it serves 2 purposes.
I see. Thank you.
And then again, pool lighting. This is something that's been coming up in recent years, is that we want to restrict the number of pool lights as well as the direction of pool lights, right? So we want underwater lights to be placed in such a way that they don't shine on neighboring properties. So pool lighting should always be kind of oriented towards the house or just away from neighbors if, you know, possible. The EDPC did want to add clarification of a maximum of 4 lights in the pool, or 3 lights in a pool and 1 with a spa if it's built in. So there is room for potentially setting a maximum amount in the pool. Obviously, this doesn't take into account size of pool, right? You could have a very large pool and maybe 4 isn't enough, or you can have a very small pool and 4 might be too much. But of course, this is a policy, right? There's always room for exceptions and or the commission or the director to determine what's appropriate. Special event lighting. So special event lighting, seasonal or otherwise, shall be limited to 60 days. And then single night parties or events shall adhere to all of these guidelines. And of course, no searchlights, uplights, or dance lights, which could shine up and out of the property are allowed. So yeah, just putting these here so that we have it on the books. If someone throws a party, unfortunately, we wouldn't be able to go after them until the following day, but it is good to have in the policy. EDPC was forwarded a copy of the draft, and they provided additional clarifications and language. I'm not going to go through all the comments, but I did allude to some of them in my presentation. And of course, the commission has access to that document and can include it verbatim in their recommendation to City Council or with modification. Public comments. This item was noticed in the news in a publication, and to date, staff has not received any public comments. I was actually contacted by a resident who is currently doing a landscape screening plan and had questions about the policy, but he had no actual comments on the policy itself. So. And he wouldn't be held to the policy anyways, because his application came in before the policy. Next steps. So the commission basically can recommend adoption or rejection of the policy update with or without modification to the City Council. And then the City Council will hold a public hearing to adopt or reject the policy update. And then following that, staff can prepare a handout / brochure for the policy. So, applicants who come in for a pre-application meeting, we can hand them something and they can, they can digest it when they develop their lighting plan. And that basically concludes my presentation. Any questions?
Great, thank you, Jeremy. Very good. Any more questions for Jeremy?
Jeremy, if we come up with some changes tonight, does it have to come back to Planning Commission, or can we say, would you send this up to City Council with the following changes?
You can continue the project only if you want us to do some more research. If you want to just give us verbatim a change or an update that you want to include, we can go straight to City Council.
Okay.
But the motion does need to be kind of clear.
Thank you.
Okay, and at this point, we really don't have an applicant since we are the applicant. And at this point, we should probably allow members of the public to make comments and then give Jeremy a chance to respond back with all of us here. All right, and I see we have 3 hands raised for comments. So we will start with the first one. I see Kit Gordon. Cody, thank you. Welcome, Kit.
Hello, Kit.
Commission. Thank you for this presentation and for the time to speak. I have noticed, and I'm not sure how this policy would apply, but through town, I see a lot more trees that are wrapped with strings of lights going up 20 feet or so. I also see long strings of lights being hung in backyards to just illuminate, and these lights are on all night long. I also see more pathways that are like within a property, like a walking path. But again, the lights are on all the time, even though no one's out there and no one's walking on their paths. And I'm not sure if those types of lights will be allowed on the existing properties, or is this just for new properties? And I'm also wondering if some of these lights, if there's any conditions where the lights turn off at certain hours after sunset, or some way that they're not on all night long, shining up. I'm not making any specific recommendations. These are more questions and my observations that I see a lot more lighting around town, and I don't think it's good for our environment. I certainly don't enjoy it when I'm out and about. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kit. Okay, so our next speaker here is VJ. Welcome, VJ. Let's see. Welcome, VJ.
Hi there, can you guys hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Great, thank you from EDPC's perspective, I just want to reiterate that the most important thing is to take action. Lighting technology is evolving, and so just trying to stay on top of it is really important for us. Some things that I want to highlight in Jeremy's presentation, which was excellent, and these things should not hold up tonight's ability to approve after your discussion. The first thing I want to mention is that the accumulation of lights it's a bit vague and it's open to interpretation. We do see a lot of recessed lights in outdoor settings come up, and I think a homeowner wouldn't know how to interpret accumulation. Don't accumulate too much light. So I think something a little bit more specific around that would be very helpful to homeowners. The second thing I want to mention is that garage doors, and I heard the question from one of the planning commissioners. Garage doors are problematic because garages have fluorescent workshop lights. So while we are today discussing garage doors, there's also a secondary issue, which is windows in garages. An example, I won't mention the example, but we've had cases where homes have massive windows in garages, and then those large windows emit white light directly onto 280, for example, or onto other homes. Third point is tree lights. The only little nit I'd like to add, please, in there is that the tree should be evergreen. So small thing, but that'd be really helpful. And then on the fourth thing, I just wanted to clarify the point about pathway lights and the heights of pathway lights. Most of the time we see ground level pathway lights. We do see pathway lights at 18 inches. We've now started to see 22 inches also. The most important thing is that we distinguish pathway lights from bollard lights. Bollard lights, we mostly see them in a public setting like a school or a mall. Incredibly bright, but the confusion going from pathway to bollard, it's a very slippery slope. So just wanted to mention that when we talk about the heights of pathway lights also. And that's it. I really want to thank Jeremy for everything. And I want to just reiterate, please, let's take action. Thank you.
Thank you so much, VJ. And I see we have a hand raised up with Sasha. Welcome, Sasha.
Hello. Would it make some sense to more directly regulate the thing that you were trying to protect? I mean, it sounds like dark sky was a major interest. Would it make sense to specify a measure of, watts per meter squared at some altitude above the property directly, rather than, try to go piecemeal and come up with all the possible ways that someone could potentially figure out how to use a light, which seems like a difficult thing to try and do. Thank you.
We have actually discussed some of those questions, not from altitude, but from off the property, because what you describe is, a good way to measure that. And it might also address some of the issues about light emitting from inside a home, which is another separate issue. But I don't think that the current policy here is trying to address the interior lights. It's more the exterior lights. Though that does bring up a question I have, which was, how is this different from a dark skies policy? It does seem like we have quite a few features that promote dark skies like policies. If we wanted to do a dark skies policy, what else would we do?
I can discuss that later. Let me continue with public comment first, please. Okay, we still have one hand raised up here. I see Duffy Price. Welcome, Duffy.
Okay, gotcha. Hey, listen, thank you very much for this is very important, but I just wanted to know, does the town have any awareness that your recharging lights along the town hall parking lot are horrible? So what you guys got to take care of those, they're really bad. And you got to start at home first, okay, and clean up your lighting for the town hall area. And then the second thing is I've been working with Steve Padovan about the lights down at the VA hospital that are blasting up to us who live along the La Cresta skyline here, that they're terrible. And I think Steve said he was going to try and talk to somebody down in Palo Alto if they would be, cooperative and do something about changing those lights. There's 5 huge lights that are beamed right up to us in this area, and they're really polluting the area. So hopefully they can do something about that too. So it's not only on our own, land, but it's what we have to look at outside also. So thanks a lot, you guys. Jeremy, great job. This is really terrific tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Duffy. Thank you for your comments. Okay, let's see. Do we have any more public comments? I think we have handled everybody. Okay, with that, we'll bring it back here. And Jeremy, since you're our presenter tonight, we'll let you address any and all the questions that were suggested by the public here.
Sure. As the applicant, do I only have 5 minutes?
You have as long as you want. You're not.
I'll start with Kit's question regarding lights. So one of the things that's really hard to regulate are lights that just plug in, right? So this is an outdoor lighting policy that's more related towards site development proposals, because that's when the town can really, ask an applicant for certain things. So lights wrapping a tree, those Christmas lights, they're generally just, 2-prong plug-in type lights. If they are located in setbacks, we can definitely, as a code enforcement case, go after them and ask them to remove them. But if they're not in the setbacks, we ask them to remove them, or we can ask them to do that, but they can always just put them back up. And those types of lights aren't really subject to any permit or approval. Same goes for like lights that you can buy at Home Depot, like solar lights, right? They can just be stuck in the ground anywhere. So if you do see those and you do think they are a little too close to the property line, certainly code enforcement can go after them. It's a bit harder to go after those because we have to, one, get photographs of them on at night, and we also need to confirm that they are too close to the property line. Our code enforcement officer, Joe Zanarini, he has actually responded to several complaints about lights. So it's certainly something that you can do. But yeah, generally this outdoor lighting policy and anything that the planning department gets involved in would be site development permits. Again, nothing prevents a homeowner from trying to enjoy their own property until it's a violation. And so that would be lights and setback. So for VJ, thank you for clarifying the whole windows in garages versus the garage doors themselves. So what I'm hearing is that the garage door itself can only have 30% glazing, whereas windows can only emit 30% of the lights. Hopefully that's the correct understanding.
That was my understanding as well.
Right. For Sasha, so we did think about a more scientific approach to defining light accumulation. And that's actually where we differ from the other jurisdictions that we researched, right? Like I mentioned, they some jurisdictions used foot candles as a measurement. And so, the same light fixture can have different foot candles at different diameters, right? So if you have overlapping cones of light, the foot candles are increased, right, in that overlap. We felt that that was a little too much scientific work, and that would require much more detailed lighting plans and additional review for planning staff. We found that our current approach of limiting the lumens and the color temperature and then having a discussion with applicants, say at a hearing, about the number of lights, it's worked for us, and we haven't had too much trouble with that in the past. Most applicants, they are willing to remove one row of lights or something like that to make it a little bit better. And, this way, when we don't have a formula for the amount of lights, we do allow for some cases where you might have a little bit more or less, but we don't want to go for a one size fit all type thing. And so again, this is a policy. There are room for exceptions. And there is room for a little bit of vagueness. That's mostly what I can answer. As far as Mrs. Price's question about lights off-site and in different cities, the most we can do is ask them to reduce the lighting or to ask their planning staff to look into it. And so maybe that's something that Mr. Padavin's done. I'm not sure, but we can maybe follow up.
Great. Yeah, thank you. Thank you on that. Also, you know, half the time I think it's making people aware. They don't realize what they're admitting off of a property until it's brought to light or brought to light, yeah, made aware of it, of the situation. So anyway, well, thank you, Jeremy, for answering and all that. So what I really should probably do, because we still can talk to Jeremy, is close the public hearing and bring it back to ourselves. I did prepare something like a pseudo EDP, you know, a few little tweaks and changes to make it easy here for staff. I made one slide with a few changes. Oh, go ahead, Jeremy.
Sorry, I realize I didn't answer Commissioner Wishura's question about the difference between a dark skies compliant ordinance and ours. And I think Brigida also, you said you had an answer to that as well. There really is no difference. Most dark skies compliant just means shielded, downwards directed, no uplights. And so you can have downwards directed fixture, like not downwards, excuse me, dark skies compliant fixtures, right? That might just be a sticker plastered on the box of the fixture. So it's more of a term than an actual defined or, you know, a metric from the state or anything like that. So dark skies compliant just means limiting the emission up.
Can we call this our dark skies policy? Because I do find that it's useful for Los Altos Hills to have a dark skies policy. In fact, I thought we had a dark skies policy, but I think that it goes along with our town's character of preserving the environment to consider that.
So like I said, in the last few years, I've noticed we have a policy of maintaining dark skies, but it's not a policy, so an officially written policy. So that's why we're doing this process now. We could call it a dark skies policy. Just right now, it's called the outdoor lighting policy, consistent with what we currently have.
Right. And also when we did the study, so I was part of EDPC going back from the very beginning when I first got involved as a volunteer. We did go and study like dark sky policies of various counties in Arizona, as well as certain counties here in California, and kind of were trying to figure out what was it. And it's funny, we've already kind of been doing it anyway with like the sconces, for example, the wall sconces. Most of them, you don't see the source, everything points down. It's basically just like a shadow of a light going down on some of these wall sconces like my neighbor has. And that's definitely dark sky compliant. And so we've kind of merged it into what we're doing already, which is nice with the with that. But it was funny, in our attachment number 7, we did have the dark sky ordinance from Malibu. And I was really it was interesting, and I'm taking notes for the next policy change. This policy has been so worked on and so used for so many hundreds of applications through the fast track site development. It has really stood the rigors of time and proven itself with the charts and everything else, that I think it's so close to just launching this thing out. So now that we've closed the public comment area and the public discussion, I do have just one slide, just kind of highlighting a little bit what I thought, because I don't want to belabor this ordinance anymore. I just want to get it out at this point before technology yet again changes and we have to go back and update this thing, which could be in another 3 to 5 years because it's so fast, the technology. Is this a good time just to share my screen to show what I'd like to add on, just to minute things? And I'm doing this mainly so, let me see. And I did, in order to help out those who have trouble seeing the small print, this is everything on one slide. Otherwise, I have 2 more slides where I broke this out to 2 slides, but I'll leave it up to you how you see it on your screens. Basically, everything in black is what's already in the proposed ordinance draft. All I'm doing in red is doing a few small minor tweaks. For example, I thought it was kind of interesting, the EDP, kind of here again, we clarify that lighting is not permitted within open space easements. It's basically kind of pulling it in and sticking it in this document so everybody knows that, because it's already in other parts of our thing. And I thought it was worth mentioning that. Also, I felt that some of the EDP's comments was a little bit redundant, repetitive, and I just think less is more. So the way I got around that, it was just to add one more little thing to the definition of translucent, which was to include tinted glass. And that was it, because that helps kind of also in the area of garage doors with tinted glass, kind of explain the translucent. And then number 2, mainly just adding in, because besides seeing a single entrance or a double door entrance, we also nowadays have these big multi-door folding systems that you see in these very modern houses. So I figured, okay, that was worth just explaining yet one more level of where lights should be taken into account. And here again, it's also, there's always have the exception of the director, planning director making the decisions for each case by case, what's appropriate and what's not appropriate. And then 6, I took this off of the EDP thing, just basically re-clarifying the roof fees between recessed light and downlights, adding their exact verbatim into that thing, and also no lighting to be placed at or near the peak of an A-line roof, which is basically A-frame roof. So that just came out of their recommendations. And then also number 13, just expanding the LED lighting strips, including tape lights and bistro lights, which also has kind of come into the tree area as well. And then on the right-hand side, tree lights. Yes.
Quick question. What is the difference you see between recessed lights and downlights?
Downlights, I don't know, I just took it from the EDP, so maybe Jeremy could maybe explain that one, or we'll get BJ back on here, but it was mainly just to clarify. And I have to say, I kind of like the clarification.
The only thing I can think about is both are downlights, but one is recessed in the ceiling and the other is not. That's the only difference I can come up with, but I was just trying to get clarification.
Yeah, and I just threw it in there because, yeah.
I'm okay with it. I just wanted to.
Yeah, and then too also, since also remember, since this is a policy, we always have the exception clause of the planning director at the discretion of case by case. But here again, also in the tree lighting, since it said lights must be at a minimal number, I was thinking follow EDP, maximum of 2 lights per tree, because that can be quite a bit. And the tree should be evergreen, just like VJ said.
So why does the tree need to be evergreen?
Because when you've got a skeleton of a tree in the wintertime, you're going to see the lights broadcasting out further than if it's not evergreen.
Even if they're downlights?
Yes, because you get the foliage protecting the emanation of that light going out. So I think it's nice to clarify the tree should be evergreen.
Okay, I mean, I don't see a big need for it, but I'm okay.
Yeah, and like here again, you got the exceptional clause, the last clause in the whole policy is, up to the planning director and ourselves to decide case by case. So anyway, we've seen.
I suppose, Rajiv, it would be easier for the planning director to accept it than to say no to it. So it might be better to go ahead and say it evergreen, and if somebody wants to apply without an evergreen, they could accept it.
Exactly. Okay. And then the last one was basically also just here again, putting in the maximum of 4 underwater lights for the pool and spa combined. And here too, if you have an unusually long and rectangular, long, skinny pool of whatever, and you need something more, well, then that's an exception that's made by the planning director. But if nothing else, at least this puts a little bit more parameters. And I kind of just grabbed, I wanted to do less is more approach. I feel like at this point, we're so close to launching this lighting policy out the door. I didn't want to muddy it up any more than this, just the clarifications. And so that's my take on it.
Brigida, I kind of agree with your ultimate goal there of let's get this launched. But I would like to take a minute just to talk about the dark skies concept, because if past is prologue, it could be a decade before we look at this again. And when I look at the Malibu ordinance, we're doing most of it. What they have added is a curfew, and they have said that security lighting should extinguish no later than 10 minutes after activation. The curfew is that outdoor lighting shall be extinguished by 11 p.m. or when people are no longer present in the area. Those seem to be pretty modest regulations. And I just wonder if we all, or maybe we don't, agree that being able to say that we are a dark skies community might be beneficial for us all, and that we might go ahead and add those 2 or 3 things to the policy in order to accomplish it, and rename the policy a dark skies policy. And I'm really curious to hear what other commissioners might have to say about that.
So,
Let me should I stop screen share, because it's easier for us to talk when we can see each other's faces.
Sure.
Because
I can go next because I mean, some of my comments also will fit in well with what Jim you're just saying. Broadly, I'm in support of this policy, and I would like something to go to the council for review and get something on record. However, my biggest issue for lighting in our town is not this policy. Our biggest issue is actually code enforcement. Okay. If I look at our code enforcement, it's so weak that over time we keep on adding more and more policies just to tighten it, but with very little impact. Let's look at the comments made by all our, most of the people who talked. Kit Gordon, she talked about all of the issues. Well, they are existing homeowners, nothing to do with this policy. Vijay talked about lighting technologies evolving. Guess what? When lighting technologies evolve, the largest violators are existing homeowners who upgrade to the new solutions without any overflow. Duffy's comments, again, violators are, our own town and other towns, existing owners. Plug-in lights, solar lights, always a challenge, nothing you can do about it. The basic point I'm trying to get across is, unless we also suggest to council an approach of enforcing the code and educating the residents who have existing homes to follow certain lighting policies, forget about dark sky policies. The dark sky policy today is violated by all existing homes in town, not by the new homes. Okay. LED lighting is something brand new. It only came into existence in the last, decade. Incandescent lighting was always there. And now in California, you can't find incandescent bulbs. So everybody who had that has to go and do LED lighting. Do they need a permit? No. Can they do anything they want? Absolutely. We see 4,000 Kelvin lighting, bright lights all over town. I have seen that as I drive by. So the point I'm trying to make is this policy is great. We should have it done, but we need to spend more time figuring out how to impact existing homeowners, educating them, letting them know, what our new lighting policies are, this handout and brochure Jeremy talked about, give it to existing homeowners, not only to new applicants of homes. Our time is better spent in doing that than coming up with yet more policies. I'll stop there.
But I'd like to discuss that with you, Rajiv, because what Jeremy commented, for instance, the string lights over the dinner table that's outside, that's left on all the time. We don't have a regulation for that. It's not that homeowners are violating any regulation we have. And maybe what you're saying is that we need those sorts of regulations.
Our policy is to be, the first thing is we need to have that policy, which we are putting that policy in for with the present one which we have written, but provide that to existing homeowners. Let the existing homeowners read this policy and review their own lighting. And I can guarantee you, they will find a lot of violations that they didn't know about, because all they did is, oh, my incandescent light, bulb fused. I'm going to go to Home Depot, buy a LED bulb and replace it. Well, the LED bulb could have been 400 Kelvin and like 2000 lumens.
If I could break in here, well, there's a fundamental difference between an ordinance and a policy.
Yes.
And we're making this a policy, not an ordinance.
Correct.
And the last thing I want is for when I have a barbecue outside and I happen to light up what's the picnic table, to have the town code enforcement officer knocking at my front door. For those who have never lived in East Germany, you really don't want that. Be careful for what you're asking.
I agree. And that's more to do with, like, let's say parties or other things. But what I'm trying to say is existing homes which never had LED lightings for their outdoors now have placed LED lights because all their incandescent bulbs fused and they can't buy them anymore. We need to educate them on what are the right type of LED lights that they can replace them with. Because most of the violators I see in town are existing homeowners, unfortunately, not new homeowners. And I don't know how to solve the problem, but I just wanted to put it in front of everybody here.
Yeah, and I understand, Rajiv. I think what's important here is start with this one step. Let's update our current lighting policy, get it out there, and then continue to figure out, maybe we need a education mailer that goes out when we have this finally formulated, send out a flyer to all town residents saying this, hey, just so you know, this is our lighting policy. And even though you're existing, just be aware of it, make people aware. It's going to be education bit by bit.
Absolutely.
So let's not get caught up in all the things we can't control. Let's just get this thing done and out the door. That's what I'm saying.
I completely agree. That is why I said in the beginning that we do need to get this policy out, but let's not spend any more time on this. Spend time in coming up with something creative to address existing homeowner lighting challenges, is the point I was trying to raise.
Do you think, Rajiv, if we pass this lighting policy and then ask staff to look into a mailer that hits the key points of this, that could somehow bend it towards the existing lighting situations, in addition to the new lighting situations, that we might be able to make a little bit of progress on your...
Absolutely. I think that would be the most important thing to do. So if I were to recommend to the council, I would say pass this policy, but along with it, have a mailer, some educational, material for all town residents to say that these are the policies we are applying to new development, but we also expect these policies to be followed by all existing or all residents in town. Because we want to be a dark sky compliant town. Because without that, we can never be a dark sky compliant town.
Well, I'm not sure we can spend money like that, but we could recommend to council when we send this forward that they ask Sophia to look into this. What do you think of that idea, Sophia?
And I think my understanding is the reason that we got this policy in place is because of all the site development permits that we were reviewing and the issues we were having. So this was we were trying to solve that problem. And what Commissioner Patel is, referring to, that is a different set of problems, which would require what you were saying, different approach altogether. So I agree to that. So I think we should kind of separate these two issues and go ahead with this policy and look into some creative ideas to, tackle that issue.
What do you think of the value of having a dark sky policy in a town like Los Altos Hills?
So my understanding is that when I was reading into like Cupertino and Malibu, right, most of the policies or the regulations that they do have, some of those regulations did make into this ordinance. Jeremy, am I correct?
Yeah, I mean, our policies are pretty much aligned. The only difference between enforceability is a policy versus an ordinance.
An ordinance, yes. That is the only policy. With ordinance, yes, we can have a code enforcement officer go and take an action. With the policy, these are more like recommended actions, right? And with the site development permit, we have seen that usually residents do want to comply, and they have been complying. And again, as Vice Chair Ashura, you were talking about renaming the policy. The dark sky is basically to kind of limit the light pollution. So if you want, you can rename the policy, but we were basically updating the old outdoor lighting policy. So
I do like the idea, if council so chooses, of staff getting the opportunity to put their work in front of residents and to have residents feel progress like a dark sky policy and the new changes and education about the existing lighting issues. Anyway, that's just my comment.
Again, the newsletter, the quarterly newsletter that we have, that's a great opportunity for staff to include education, educational policies or, educating the residents on this issue. I think that is a very great idea. And again, if commission would want, staff can definitely look into crafting, like something for that newsletter.
I think that's a great idea because what we're trying to do is make residents be cognizant, aware, and be respectable to other neighbors. They probably don't realize what they're doing to their neighbors. They don't realize that they're emanating this light pollution to the neighbors. So by having an article in the quarterly newsletter, I think that's a great place to start, and just, re-educating everybody. Hey, we have no street lights here. We have no sidewalks here. We've got pathways and we got darkness because we do like dark skies. I don't think we need to label this dark skies because it's already implied the way we have everything in this town with no streetlights or anything. It's dark skies is definitely what we're aiming for. But right now, I just want to get that we have a very full slate of items on our plate for this year, housing element being the one. I just want to get this puppy out the door. So that's why I say I have my few little changes. Some of the stuff that I saw in the Malibu ordinance, I'm like, oh yeah, I'm putting that on for the next go around because really at this point, I do not want to muddy up the waters. I just want to get this thing out.
I have 3 technical points that I'd like to just look at. One is the safety lights. There was a table of color temperatures in the presentation, Jeremy. Would it be appropriate to add a row there for safety lights so that we could put a limit on lumens for safety light? This is one of 3 questions I have.
Can I respond to that also myself?
Sure.
Okay, that table is what gets cut and paste in any landscaping review application and this and that. We do not want to encourage safety lights. That's like something else. If you start putting like those spotlights there on that table, it's going to bring it to forefront. Like, oh yeah, well, shoot, they put spotlights here. Well, we don't allow spotlights. You don't want to encourage that. You know, if they have safety lights, then leave it the way it is, and then just say they have to be deactivated by after 10 minutes, like what they have in Malibu, something like that. I don't want it on the table though.
We could make another table. I mean, the question is whether it would be useful to have a limit somewhere, anywhere for residents.
Sorry,
I would-
if I may ask Chair Indico, your concern is that if we add it to the table, it will bring to their attention that it is allowed? Is that the concern?
Yes, it'll make it seem like that we're allowing it. And I really don't want it to be put together with all the other lighting that we use for landscaping, put it that way.
To answer Jim's concern, one thing is you could achieve the same effect by putting somewhere words to the effect, not that you're talking about a new kind of light, but you say something like, any kind of light that is automatically activated by movement of a warm-blooded animal or something like that, must extinguish within 10 minutes.
So motion activated, you can just.
Any
But
kind
it
of
was
light
also
that
the
activates.
5,000.
What?
The 5,000 Kelvin, you know, that's the objection that I have.
Oh, I thought it
Well,
was
just
big on too long or whatever.
No, I concur with that as well, but I just thought that the table would be a spot where it specifies lumen and temperature, and maybe this is just another sentence that says any safety light that is motion sensitive must extinguish within 10 minutes and may not be greater than 3,000 Kelvin and 800 lumens. 600 lumens.
Okay, well, you make it, 600 to 800. 1,000 is too much, I'm gonna tell you right now, because I have my little display case of, I've never had a chance to show this to our new planning director, but I have my lumen display, but
Malibu is 850, and I don't mind it bright if it shuts off in 10 minutes.
yeah, the problem is we had a neighbor that has not moved in their house. They had 2 huge spotlights shining down to 4 other neighbors. It was on for 4 days until it got extinguished. And it was 5,000 kelvins and at least around 1,000. I mean, it penetrated to 4 neighbors down the street from me. And they called me and I'm like, see, click, fix, see, click. Fix.
So Brigitte, I think you're agreeing with me.
Well, to a point, I would agree with you as far as, let's put in number 8, say that 3,000 kelvins, great, I like that. 800 lumens, okay, fine, and extinguishes within 10 minutes.
Yes.
So let me make a comment here. No safety lights are below 4,000 kelvins. Okay, so if you look at most safety and spotlights, go to Home Depot. They are 4,000 kelvins and above. So it might be better to put 4,000, but many of them are 5,000 also, actually.
So let's go 4,000 if they're available, and they're off in 10 minutes. You know,
But
I think
yes, the timer part is most important.
You know what? How about we don't put any, because since we have not investigated, I spent a lot of time calling manufacturers when we put this thing together a couple of years ago. I call literally manufacturers around the United States figuring this stuff out with lumens and kelvins. Since we don't know those numbers, I would say put just a 10 minutes on there and let it be up to staff if they have that range.
So I will horse trade with you, which is that you're right about the kelvins, but I think lumens, I'm comfortable with an 8 or 850 limit. That's what Malibu did, and off within 10 minutes.
Okay, so do 850 lumens and 10 minutes, and then we'll let staff have to deal with the kelvins, because 4,000, 5,000, it's interesting because when I was investigating this, California has a strict policy. They only have 2 types of kelvins out there. One was the 3,000, 2,700, or they got the 5,000, which what you see inside garages. When you have those shop lights in garage, those are 5,000 kelvins because it's like daylight, and it's not healthy for us. It's not healthy for animals. It's way too bright. So yeah. So 4,000, that to me is a surprise. Somebody snuck that one in or changed the rules in California.
Okay, so that was the first one. The second one is it says LED strip lights are prohibited. Personally, I don't have anything against LED strip lights. I don't want to see them. And so my thinking is that LED strip lights should be prohibited unless they're recessed, unless you can't see them.
Yeah, forgive me, but I have a bunch of cabinets in my kitchen, and underneath each cabinet, lighting up the counter, is an LED strip light. It isn't doing any harm to anybody else. Come on, give me a break.
And I think you can do that outdoors as well.
Well, no, well, we've seen these LED strip lights are in barbecue pavilions. Instead of having down lights, you'll see the LED strips lights under the trellis.
That be regulated away. If you can see
Well,
the LED strip light, that's no good. But if it's recessed and you can't see it, I
and
think
you
that's
know what? We have approved that. You know, if you remember to Via Felice, we did approve LED strip lights that were tucked underneath, and those were approved. Let that be to the discretion of the planning director and ourselves. Let's just go ahead and, these are the ones that are visible. We don't want to visibly see LED lighting strips. We don't want to visibly see tape lights or bistro lights because it's the light source is right there. So that's
now you bring up another point. You mentioned bistro lights. I tried to look up the definition, and from what I can figure from the definition, a bistro light, by definition, is one that is visible. It's hanging. It's a light bulb or multiple light bulbs.
Mm-hmm.
So to talk about bistro lights which are recessed, they're not bistro lights anymore.
I guess I'm okay with the vagary of the bistro light, but I'm definitely okay with prohibiting raw LED strip lights. But I do think that if you can't see the filament, you know, if it's recessed, that we should not be regulating the choices residents make about LED strip lights. They're inexpensive.
I have a horse trade with you here then, Jim. How about we say visible LED lighting strips, you know, is basically put visible because these are things that we can see, okay? To clarify, because we have approved with no problem.
Yes, okay, we're done. Number 3.
Sorry. If I make clear, Chair Indico and Vice Chair Shura, you said visible LED strip lighting shall be prohibited?
Yes.
Yeah, and actually, if I do my slide again, it'd be visible LED lighting strips, comma, tape lights and bistro lights are prohibited.
Okay. I'm just writing it. So at the end, I'm going to just share the screen so that when you make the motion, this is with these edits.
Okay.
My last one was simple. I heard VJ say 22 inches for pathway lights, and I think we should go with her recommendation.
I disagree because she was saying more 18 inches because 22 gets confused with bollards. Bollards create more light. I would rather leave it at 18 and let be at the discretion of the planning director and ourselves to make it higher. But 22, the few inches more, it makes a difference.
If I go to Home Depot and I look up pathway lights, are they 22 inch? Can I buy 22-inch tall pathway lights?
They're 18, like all the little, the lights that you buy that are the solar ones, they're all 17 inches, just so you know, 17 change.
Oh,
So,
I don't mean the solar ones, but
yeah, even the small ones, they're all on 18. It's the professional ones that you can sometimes get at 24 and 22 inches. But the thing is, the higher, your knees are basically close to 18 inches. Anything that comes up by mid thigh, it's going to have a bigger broadcasting. And here again, you have the exception that if you have one that's sitting at 22 and it's 20 feet apart from another one, that can be approved. This is a policy.
hang on just a second. Jeremy, can you review for us VJ's comments or the EDPC's comments about the 22 versus the 18?
bollard, just to confirm, the bollards are way more powerful in terms of lumens, so they will never qualify in our
Yeah.
So
policy
right, so
anyways.
regardless of height, we are still limiting them to 200 lumens if we're calling them path
Exactly.
lights. So even if they select a bollard that's 22 inches or less, or they're still going to be limited to 200 because the use would be a path light. So perhaps maybe some clarification on the definition of path light is what would solve the issue, because we already have defined the maximum lumens.
So can we say
but-
the pathway light to include any kind of bollard lighting or something like that? Because I know there are these short bollards as well, and they're called basically pathway lighting. They're like 8 inches, but usually bollards, their height is usually 40 to 44 inches.
Yeah, and they're very, and we've not allowed them in the past. I just know from all the other side development, we've never really allowed bollards because they're just
Tall.
They're tall and they illuminate more. One thing too, oh, so yeah, I got a picture sent to me. Going back to the under the roof eaves, Rajiv, the recessed lights and the downlights. What the downlights look like, they're actually look like somebody took a cylinder and extends it down under the roof eave. So it's a cylinder, and then it has the light up in there, but it's a cylinder that's actually extended down. That's the downlight. I didn't know. Okay, so yeah, it's
almost like a pendant. It's almost like a pendant
it's an attached pendant that's stuck on
the ceiling.
Yeah, exactly.
Got
Yeah.
it.
So anyway, so I made a quick change even to my slide here, if you guys are fine with that, and we'll add in.
I'm waiting till I assumed we were
Go,
going
Yitzi.
going on and
Yeah,
on
we're
and on.
Yitzi,
Let
your
me
turn.
bring up some things which I've been patiently waiting. In terms of enforcing current residents, there's one at 26379 Fremont Road. You may be familiar with it. It's Town Hall. If you look in the, we have a rule about floodlights and in the setback. I've count here, I'm looking at it on my other screen, no less than 3 lights about 10 foot high, right on the border of the parking lot with the next door neighbor. Now that is a parking lot, maybe, you make exceptions, but we overlook these things so easily. There is a neighbor there and he's looking right at it. And then in addition, we have a parking, an electricity supply thing for electrical vehicles, which has a light which will knock your eyes out at night. So we might want to pay a little bit of attention to those kinds of things, but that's an aside. We talk about safety. When I was a fire commissioner, we had a little problem. Our house up in Los Altos Hills, the person got up in the morning, they had breakfast. They were going to go to the office. They walked down, they sat in their car, they turned on the ignition key, and the whole garage blew up. What had happened is during the night, a rat had chewed through a fuel line. The floor was covered in gasoline, one spark, and the garage exploded. So we have a number of people in town who have had lesser problems, but they are paying for new wiring harnesses in their cars all the time. If you subscribe to Nextdoor, it was only last week that somebody complained that they spent over $3,000 on a new wiring harness for their car. And the culprit is a rat. Now, if you live close to a creek, as I do, you can jump high and you can jump low, but there will be rats, and they will, if you live here long enough, eat a hole in your car somewhere, usually in the wiring harness. People say, well, you can solve that. You put mothballs in the engine compartment or chili powder. None of that works very well. I've tried them all over the years. And what I have is in gross violation of all of the town's policies. I have safety lights protecting my vehicles. What they consist of is a LED light, fairly bright. It's a spotlight, but it's mounted at ground level on the driveway. and points underneath the car. When I park my car at night or anytime, the car drives up to the light and the light is pointing under the front bumper. And that light comes on at night and it keeps rats away because rats don't like brightly lit spaces. It's worked now for, I haven't had to replace a wiring harness in maybe 20 or 30 years. Before that, I replaced 3 of them because I happen to live on a creek. I know for a fact, because I've been consulted by different neighbors, probably a dozen over the years, who have got similar systems. They have a transformer, which you could buy at the Ace Hardware, which is sensitive to daylight. It doesn't provide 12 volts when it's daylight. And when it's night, it provides 12 volts. And I have an LED light under each one of my vehicles. You can't see it off the property unless you lie on your belly on the driveway, then you'll see the light. Does the lighting policy have to cover this? I don't know. But as soon as you make blanket statements, you know, any light outside that must do this or that or the other, be careful. My neighbor has another kind of light, which drives me crazy, but I put up with it. It's mounted in a tree. It's at least 5,000 kelvins. I mean, it's almost purple white. It shines in all directions. And why is it there? He's keeping some kind of, I think, insect away. I can spot it from where I sit in my Archie bunker chair watching TV if I have the drapes open. And it's a point source and it's in a tree, probably 50 feet away, but it is fearsomely bright and it's a point source. Are we going to go after that guy? I don't think so. But he has a problem. I think he's keeping horseflies away or something, because the neighbor on the other side of him has a barn, and maybe there are horseflies or whatever. But I just want to point out that there are technically infractions of this policy that we sort of not considering. I know there are a lot of people in town who have these lights in their driveways because I happen to have a website which tells you how to build them, and it's consulted quite a bit. So yeah, and I would point out this institution on Fremont Road, which is in flagrant violation. It's not only is it a floodlight, but 10 foot high and it's omnidirectional. And it's right in the setback. It's almost on the border of the property. I'll subscribe to that.
Yitzi, is your neighbor's light in the setback?
He's got actually 2 or 3 of these lights. Yeah, they're mounted in trees. One of them is about 30 foot up in a tree. And it's a really brilliant, I mean, it's there to push away some kind of bird or insect or rat or something.
Regarding the lights in our parking lot, so I wasn't the person to approve that. However, I do know that in the middle of last year, or maybe it was 2 years ago, we did actually have a spate of break-ins in cars at town hall, and so that was probably why we installed those. But yeah,
I think that's why it's a policy. A policy is more flexible, and I'm not arguing to take those lights away, but I pointed out because if you were to make it an ordinance, it would be a difficult. Now, I am also not the neighbor living next door, so I can say that easily enough. It doesn't bother me. And I'd prefer not to have my car broken into at night.
Well, I think we've had some fulsome discussion, and Brigida captured quite a bit of the changes we had all been thinking of. The only thing I would like to add finally is to somehow get a wider participation in the question of whether we want to call this dark skies or not. I still feel there's value in doing that, and maybe we could give that as an option to city council to consider.
Can I make a suggestion, Jim? Because the way our general plan's written and also other things that correlate and relate back to, I don't want to start retitling things. How about when we address things like as information to our residents, we'll say our dark sky policy and refer to it informally, not formally, because otherwise when you get to the general plan and the municipal codes referring to policies and ordinance and all that, you've got to have a consistency. I would rather use our marketing sense and our educational side to say our dark skies compliant town.
Well, I do think it is the marketing side that I'm trying to promote.
Okay.
And I wonder, Jeremy, if there's a way in a introductory sentence, you could talk about something like we are advocating for or trying to promote dark skies features or dark, somehow market it a little bit in our policy, however we want to call it.
Yeah, thank you, Jim. Yeah, because you know what? I think we refer to kind of informally anyway as our dark sky policies.
I thought we had one.
Well, we do, but as official title, because of the way I've learned from staff, let's just keep the consistency of the titles because you don't want to start.
Yeah, I think I agree. Let's keep it as a marketing approach, because if you think about it, we call our town having a rural atmosphere. It's indirectly dark sky because we don't even have streetlights. So calling it dark sky in our marketing brochure as we educate the residents is more powerful than in our written policies.
Because they're not going to.
And I think it is important that, we talked about this, that we'll probably have some newsletter article for this, but newsletter article will educate the residents. But I would say we have to start by even educating the council, so that my recommendation is when the staff brings this outdoor policy in front of the council, at least educate them about the challenges of enforcement and suggest to them that this is one of the things we are going to do, which is writing up the article.
Could we add in here something which says, and institutional parking spaces can be lit?
I do that.
You see, there are synagogues, there are schools, there are monasteries, I guess. I think public parking spaces which are used at night for safety should be floodlit.
Yes, see, you know what? Can I make a suggestion? Because this is typically for site development of our houses and being developed. You're not, when it comes to these bigger things like Fremont Hills Country Club or the synagogues or other things, that's going to come under special consideration anyway, with exceptions and stuff. That this is more for the plain and vanilla site development, fast track things.
The enumerated uses are conditional uses, and so that would be the appropriate place to maybe restrict or allow for different lighting types.
And that would certainly fall under safety.
Yeah.
Exactly. So I think, yeah, luckily this is a policy. There's a lot of still room for exceptions and interpretation. It's really pretty strong guidelines that we put forth. So I'm just trying, at this point, we're so far down there. I just want to get what we have and just get it out the door. Also, let me be real cognizant here. We have not let Ed have a chance to speak. Not that we have been very quiet amongst ourselves here. Ed, do you have anything to say? Because otherwise we're going to continue having a lively discussion.
We'll go off in the other direction, because one of my pet peeves are bicycles that don't have any lights or reflectors, and people who walk at night and are dressed totally in black, that you don't see them when you're driving until you get right up to them. So in terms of having a dark sky policy and a low light level in town, I think I'm maybe on the other side of that
I see.
particular issue, but I think what everyone has been saying is very productive. I think that's the right direction the town ought to be going. And so I'll keep my particular pet peeves to myself and try not to run over people that are walking along with no lights after dark, all dressed all in black.
I think Ed has a good point though. And, you know, we were talking about that educational article. Maybe what Ed is talking about could be addressed in there. And some recommendations to residents about, you know, having some, you know, not wearing black clothes at night, or at least having some safety strips on their clothing would be a good addition to that article's, you know, text.
Well, as long as it makes for a consistent article and doesn't go too many directions, you know, as far
For
as,
sure.
yeah. But yeah, that could be a safety article as far as for
Yes.
people, bicyclists and pedestrians here in our town, as far as safety article from that standpoint. So anyway, so I did a quick change on my slide. The only thing is, so Jim, the one that you wanted, it was number 8, the spotlights and the floodlights basically being at or under 850 lumens and extinguished no later than 10 minutes after activation. That was one thing, right? Because I have got my slide to make it easier for staff to also capture it. And all I did was change number 13 and put visible in front of that sentence.
Can you share the slide again?
Yeah.
If you have updated it?
I'm working with it real time here, so yeah.
Oh.
Okay. Share. The only thing I couldn't do too quickly is add the number 8, which is the spotlights and floodlights, but I think that could be one that maybe hopefully Jeremy and our planning director can help get that. But I just changed here. So this says visible. So, and then now that we know what downlights are, that makes sense. And then here, all we're doing is saying, explaining that besides having a single door and a double door, there's also multi-door systems. And then just expanding the definition for tinted glass. And then here putting evergreen tree, maximum 2 lights here, 4 underwater lights. So I try to be less is more. And then we'll put in number 8 of Jim with the 850 lumens and extinguished no later than 10 minutes of activation. Was that everything, Jim? Did we get everything?
Yes.
Oh, music to my ears. Did he
Well,
say?
I did think the 22-inch pathways light height, not bollards, it would be acceptable, but if you want 18, that's fine.
I like to keep it at 18 and let them decide, or let ourselves decide as we get the applications if to go much higher. Because you know what? This has been done for the last couple of years, and to have something like that switch at the last minute, that's when I'm like, wait a minute, you know, that can still be an exception. You know, we have the whole.
I actually didn't have an opinion about it. It came from
EDP,
yeah.
And I spoke to a couple of EDP and EDPC, and let me tell you right now, they're split on that too.
Okay.
Yeah, because I spoke to Haj, actually, who's in Hong Kong. I spoke to him. I spoke to Carol, and of course we heard VJ, and I know a few others, their opinions too. So it's kind of split. It's not a consensus, I'll put it that way. That's why I was kind of hesitant on it and didn't include it. So anyway, so now that I've shared this, but I didn't capture number 8, which is Jim's. And let me ask, between Jeremy and our planning director, Sophia, is that enough to possibly have the beginnings of a motion to approve this thing and send it on its way?
Yes, you may want to add that a motion to pass with these revisions.
Okay, so then I'll go ahead and make the motion. I make a motion to adopt this lighting policy, outdoor lighting policy, with the revisions that we have here on my slide. And I can send you a electronic copy of this, plus the revision of number 8 with the outdoor lights and the floodlights, adding in there that they are to be less than or equal to 850 in lumens and extinguished no later than 10 minutes of activation.
And the only question is on the marketing approach to the dark skies. Did we want to use that phrase in some sentence somewhere in this document or not?
No, I think this is a policy. How about we leave that as maybe a introduction by our planning staff to mention that in their introduction or in their staff report.
We can do that. And again, in any promotional materials that we hand out or mail to residents, we can include language about dark skies. So in the
That
purpose
sounds
and in the purpose and intent, or let's say we're mailing a flyer to everyone, like a postcard, we could say, support dark skies by checking out our updated policy.
Yes, precise.
Yeah.
And also be a good neighbor. Be a good neighbor to each other, as far as be cognizant that when you have these lights, what's happening to your neighbors. Okay,
Yeah,
great.
I'll second it.
Thank you, Rajiv. Okay, great. And with that, if everybody sees fit, we will do a roll call.
Okay. Commissioner Caparas,
Yes.
Commissioner Patel,
Yes.
Commissioner Smith,
Yes.
Vice Chair Washura,
Yes.
Chair Indico.
Yes, and with that, the policy and recommendations have passed and it goes on to City Council. Thank you, everyone. That was a nice, very lively discussion. And I'm so glad to see that go on. So now on to, let me ask you this. It is 9:20. Does anybody need a 10-minute, 5-minute biological break? If not, we will move on. Okay, seeing none, we'll continue moving on. We're on to new business. It's item 5.1, housing needs data report for the housing element update of 2023 to 2031, and by our wonderful planning director, Magalan. I just said that right. Sophia.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair Indigo, Planning Commission, and members of the public. This item is just informational. And let me share my screen. Can everyone see my screen now?
Yes.
Okay, so this presentation is basically about the analysis of housing needs data. And this is on the report that we received from ABAG and MTC. And this is for the housing element update. So at the meeting on January 19th, 2022, our consultant gave a preview on the requirements of housing element. And we discussed various components of housing element, including review of accomplishments, needs assessment, housing resources, constraints, fair housing and implementation plan. So keeping in mind the housing needs assessment, we received a report from ABAG MTC, and this basically is a result of the Government Code section 65583A, which requires that all local jurisdictions, they must analyze their community's housing needs and resources available to address them. Previously, it was staff who would actually go about collecting this data, but for this RENA cycle 6, because it is very complicated, ABAG and MTC actually compile this data, which includes demographic, economic, and housing stock data, so the planning staff can actually focus on, developing meaningful policies and programs rather than spending time collecting this data. So the report that we received is prepared by,
I had a quick question.
Yes.
Regarding the data. So the data was collected by these, HCD and stuff. Do you know where did the source of that data come from for them? And do you also, as planning staff for the town, have access to the raw data?
Yes. Thank you for that. And as I said, in this slide, you can tell that basically when they prepared this data, it's from the census data, including American Community Survey, and also what is known as CHAZ data. I don't know why my slide keeps skipping, sorry. So it's from census data as well as HUD's comprehensive housing affordability strategy data. So the whole idea about this report was that they already have this information and they compiled it in a form of a report. If you go on our website, in addition to this data report, I've also added all those Excel files, which includes all those tables along with their source. So I will point out to where it is. It is basically under our housing element webpage under resources. There are two documents. One is the housing needs data report, and one is the all Excel files associated with it. So the idea was that, of course, staff can utilize this data, but again, staff also needs to supplement it with additional data. And one of the reasons that we have the survey out is to supplement, to add to this data. So of course, this report will be used by staff and the consultant to guide policies and programs. However, this data, we need additional data for our AFFH analysis. So in terms of what are we going to review in this data report, we have three different categories: existing, special, and projected. Under existing, we are just, there's data regarding overpayment and overcrowding, general population, employment, and household characteristics. Under special needs, the reason we, study these special needs is because it has been studied that often these special needs group, they spend a disproportionate amount of their income to secure, decent housing. And and these are the groups that are subject to discrimination. So one of the reasons that we are actually even going about identifying these special groups. So again, very, very briefly, this is a 60-page report. I'm not going to go through each and every page, just very few highlights. In terms of population, as you can tell from the graph, that the population of the Bay Area has been increasing, of course, because of natural growth and strong economy. And the population of Los Altos Hills also did increase by 4.8%. However, this is, it is below the growth of Bay Area. Talking about population, by age, the median age in 2000 was 46.3, and it has increased to 51 years. And again, you can tell from this graph that our senior population has increased from 2000 to 2019. Talking about employment trends, we are a residential community, so of course we are a net exporter of workers, and most of the residents work, they most commonly work in financial and professional services industry. Talking about cost burden, this is basically a house is considered affordable if you spend no more than 30% of your income. 20% of our renters spend 50% or more of their income on housing, while 13.3% of owners are severely cost burdened. Again, we all know we are mostly single family. 98.2% of our homes are single family detached. Talking about special needs, 6.0% of our residents have a disability of any kind and require accessible housing. 9.9% households are large households with 5 or more people, and 2.6% of households are female-headed families. So again, this is very, very informational. I just want to guide all the residents. If they want to look into this report, it is on our Housing Element Update webpage under resources. And Commissioner Patel, in terms of the workbook, all of them are right under that data report. So again, each and every Excel file is right there. All the tables are right there for everyone's use.
Pardon me, there was one piece of data that made me wonder how good all the data was, and maybe you could look this up and at some point just let me know what was going on here.
Yes.
It said that we had decreased the number of jobs in our town in 10 years by 330 people. That just doesn't make sense to me. How did we decrease the number of jobs in our town by 330 people?
Actually, you're correct. I am seeing some discrepancy, and that's one of the reasons we are even evaluating this. Very similar to the number that you pointed out, that number is not matching. Even basic, some of the population numbers are not matching. So I have sent a letter, like email to ABAG and MTC pointing out these. And I think in my email, when I first send you the data report, I did point that there are some discrepancies.
I see. Well, I think that to the extent that those get to residents, it will undermine their acceptance.
Mhm.
So, the most that we can do, the better. Thanks.
Okay, thank you.
Actually, I do agree with Jim. Some of this data was surprising to me, and my worry is that whenever residents look at data and find one or two discrepancies, they will start assuming that all of this information or data is wrong. And that's not a very healthy situation.
And we have quite a few data scientists who live here, so.
So in the previous cycles, it was staff who would collect all this, right? But this time I think maybe because the housing element is so complicated this time that they did provide us. And of course, it's a data, I don't know, I'm actually going back to the workbook to see how they're deriving this. And that's when I've started circling some of the mistakes that I'm seeing.
And, to Jim's point, with the data scientists in town, when you have a small population that our town has, even 5 or 10 residents' mistake could magnify an issue which may not even exist. So it is very, very sensitive to the statistics because we have so low a number. It's not like you're having 10,000 or not 10,000, 100,000 residents. And so a small margin of error is, just brushed off.
Well, thank you very much, Sophia, for catching those things also and pursuing it. You're always like a couple steps ahead of any of us. So yeah, thank you very, very much.
I think I did like Vice Chair Bashura's that if I pointed out, maybe I think the next step is that we can also add some of these discrepancies if we see them on the website. I think that might help. If you want.
I wouldn't put this on the website until the numbers were vetted. That's just my 2 cents because of the risks that Rajiv just commented about.
Yeah, I would say
they say lies, damn lies, and statistics.
Yes, I think the better thing is just collect all of them and discuss it with the consultants and maybe the appropriate authorities to see if something makes sense or not.
So most of the data that's there, I think, as I said in my slide, the things that we are actually trying to gather from this data is regarding special needs. How much, what is the population of those special needs? And if we require any policies and programs to address or help those special need population. So most of the data, I think it's there because we have to include our demographics, but it will not really affect our RENA, allocation. It's more if we want to craft policies based on these.
Okay.
Yeah. Anyway, thank you very much. It's a lot. That was a fast 60 pages worth of a presentation. It's a lot of information to go through. Thank you very much.
You know, the main
highlight.
eye opener for me was the population statistics. From at least if the population statistics were correct, our town's population grew by 1,000 residents in 30 years. And the new RENA numbers expects us to grow by 2,000 in 8 years, which is a 7 to 8x increase in population. Now, wow, which small, large, or even medium-sized town can do that? I don't know. That is going to be phenomenal.
Yeah, well, we shall see, because we'll all be scrambling here. Anyway, okay, so that's the finish of item 5.1. Moving on to item 6, which is reports from the city council meetings. Is everybody okay with the meeting assignments? And as far as item 6.2, as far as the upcoming city council meetings and who is assigned to what meetings? Is it all, everybody okay with that?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, great, thank you. Then I have the assignment for reviewing here the most recent past city council of January 20th. And I have to say, I made my own notes, but I was really thrilled also that our city manager, he created a city council meeting recap within 24 hours after that meeting also. So I got to go back and double check my notes with his notes to see how well I paid attention to everything.
I confess, I used the same thing last month for my notes, my report.
Oh, I didn't even know. I just came across and I saw his email coming out and I was like, wow, that's just awesome. So anyway, because I'll tell you, I'll go quickly because it's getting late. What was interesting is Pathways Committee had a chance to report on their status, and it was Bob Ellison who gave the report. And it was interesting, some statistic is we have 77 miles of pathway that's walkable currently in our town, which I was like, isn't that cool? And we have 5 miles of pathways that need some TLC. And then we have still 36 miles of pathways yet to be installed. So that was kind of cool statistics on that one. And Pathways is going to continue with the current mode of operation and work with staff since everybody's new. We got the new public works director and go for another year to see how well the system works, to having them contract out the build out of the pathway. So we'll see how it goes. Also, under 5.8, they did add a new technology committee to our standing committees, and they're trying to basically merge education committee into the community relations committee. But community relations committee was a little bit hemming and hawing, so they still have to have a meeting and decide on that. But technology committee is going to be up and running, and a city council member Mock and Schmidt will be the advisors for that committee.
Swan.
Huh?
Swan, not
No.
Schmidt.
No. Surprise, surprise. I'll tell you later because I'll have to get to that. Yeah, that's the surprise, surprise. It was Mock and Schmidt. Yeah, I know. Because Swan helped start it. I know. The next one is 5.B is the town hall improvements. And this was really kind of confusing. Basically, they were able to separate out the motion. I think the phase 2, addition or whatever you want to call it, the town hall project was kind of put on hold. But what they did do approve was to use ARPA, the ARPA funds to basically rework the current space and office furniture and all that stuff to try to accommodate everybody in the facility of our town hall, because we're really 3 to 4 spaces that are short of housing everybody correctly. So they're going to rework the current space. And I think the future expansion of the city hall, from the sounds of it, is put on hold for the time being. It was a really confusing discussion, but that's what the vote came down to. Let's see, anything more. The next thing was a committee assignment, since it's the top of the year, and that was the interesting part. the technology committee, there were 3 contenders, Mock, Schmidt, and Swan, and Mock and Schmidt got it, which was kind of unusual. Open space is now going to be Schmidt. Tyson's come off of that, and he switched with Schmidt for community relations. And then luckily for VTA, council member Mock is going to continue with that, because we figured out there are funds that we get from VTA to do the build of the pathway along Fremont Avenue from Edith to Concepcion, and now it's going to go from Concepcion out towards Arrestadero. So whether it's a board committee from the sounds of it, but it was important enough to keep it going because we get funds from them. And then also, so Mock's going to have an environmental initiative committee, ask them to move their meetings so he can attend both. Then there's going to be an ad hoc committee for the sheriff contract, and that's going to be Swan and Mock on that one. The town decided also to go with leasing 2 electric vehicles instead of buying them, so it takes care of all the maintenance and all that stuff. Also, there was an interesting discussion about our West Bay sanitary district. Basically, it's time to go to bid again, and the deadline is July the 31st. But our Public Works Director, Oscar, gave a really interesting presentation about how well West Bay Sanitary District is doing. So they will still get it out to bid, but he explained that we as a town own all our own sewer pipes, and that there are some weak points in the system, and it takes a while. It's quite a learning curve for any of these companies to learn how to clean out, keep an eye on all our pipes, make sure everything's going where it's got to go. So that was kind of interesting. Then on to the next item, 8.A, the undergrounding by Mayor Tyson, and not much more news except for he's hoping to break ground this year. So that was good. And then the fire task force, which is Councilmember Schmidt, no report. And that was basically it. That was the gist of the meeting. So that covers that.
Thank you, Brigida.
Yeah. And then moving on to item 7, we didn't have any fast track site development meetings because everybody's so busy with housing elements and all the meetings. We've had a couple per week. So that took everybody, kept everybody busy. And then moving on to item number 8, we have our planning director report. And Planning Director Magellan, do you have anything more to add?
Again, on the topic of housing element, our housing element survey is live. So we encourage all the residents to take that survey. All the responses are anonymous, and results of the survey will be presented in aggregate. So please take the survey. Another update is that staff will be holding an online pop-up event via Zoom next Thursday, February 10th at 6 p.m. This is again an informational meeting on housing element update process and its requirements for all those who were unable to attend the joint special meeting. This is another way of connecting with staff, getting to understand housing element and sharing, your ideas with us. So,
what time is that?
6 p.m.
Okay.
The details are on our webpage, housing element update webpage.
And the survey, how do residents, this must be an online survey?
Yes.
And how do residents know to do that?
So again, the details of this survey is on our webpage. If you go there, there's a QR code if you want to scan that QR code, or if you click on a link, it will take you to that survey.
Okay, my next door neighbor.
Yes.
They're not going to go to that web page, but they might do a survey if they knew it was important and needed to be done. How do they know? How do they find out about this survey?
So we are looking into more advertising. I think I'm looking into, again, sending a postcard like how we did for the housing element, the joint special meeting. So we are looking into that postcard that's going to go to each and every resident with that QR code. And for those who do not have access or they will not be able to go online, we are printing hard copies. It's at the front. We will keep it at the front counter for anyone who wants to come to the town hall. Take that and we'll scan it and send it to our consultant.
Nextdoor, will you be using Nextdoor to communicate to residents to take the survey?
Yes, I have talked to our communications team. We do have Sarah and Chris who help us with that. So they are going to do outreach through social media. So I don't know if the town has an account. If yes, then definitely we'll post it there.
Yeah, I've seen her posted. The only thing though, Jim, with Nextdoor is how do you make sure we only get Los Altos Hills residents to respond and not everybody else that's on Nextdoor?
Well, there is a question. The first one that says, what is your relationship to Los Altos Hills? Hopefully there's a box there that says none of the above.
Yes, we do have that.
Okay,
and
good.
Yes, we do have that. That's the first thing that comes up.
Mainly because I know with social media, you can get all kinds of connections there. Okay, very good. Well, like I said, you've definitely been busy because I know she just completed the survey this week here. So that's been a lot of work. Thank you so much. Anything else? Are we? Because now we're hitting that very favorite part is item 9, which is adjournment at this point.
So before that, Jim talked about Nextdoor and other ways to publicize the survey. You talked about the meeting next Thursday. Those meetings, how are you planning to publicize those?
So again, what we are trying to do is that all this information is on our webpage. That is our main source of information. So again, every opportunity that I have, I always talk about these meetings. We have included this information in our weekly newsletter, city manager's newsletter. So that is one of the avenues. Every time, as I said, I get an opportunity to inform about these meetings. I do, even at the city council meetings, I do bring, I do talk about these upcoming meetings.
Okay, I would suggest Nextdoor, like Jim mentioned earlier. And I believe in the past, I recall Deborah having sent some such communications over Nextdoor. So there must be a way.
Yeah, I
and
think
the value of doing this is that if this all comes up and changes and decisions are made and people don't like it, and we say, oh, but we have these pop-ups, we just didn't tell you about it, or we thought that you would go to our website unprovoked, I don't think that's going to be a good enough answer if that situation occurs. So in anticipation, I think that we should really be doing a huge amount of outreach. In this day and age, it can't be that difficult. I do think that maybe the handwritten responses, okay, maybe that is something we can't do. We will require people to be able to go to a website, and maybe that's okay. But I do think that we can't just assume that they're going to go to our housing website to find this.
I think
One suggestion I would make is, we do have email addresses for all council members, planning commissioners, and all the 13 committees worth of residents. At least email blast to them any of these Zoom meetings or anything else. And maybe if each of them just sends it to 2-3 other residents, we'd get at least 200, 300 people covered.
We also have signups for residents who want to receive notifications from the town. I know I get a message with the city manager's report and all of those other things. Maybe those people could get a note that says, hey, this is here, go look and do this.
You know, I was gonna say the postcard is a really effective way because that's also, because let's face it, we all space out on our agendas, you know, for the week. It was like, oh my God, I forgot that meeting. But you know, postcards help a lot, but also a publication in the Los Altos Town Crier. You know, go old school, put a little blurb
Right.
into the Town Crier, because I know most of us read that pretty quickly. And
You know, that would cover the handwritten element. And that I think would be very important.
yeah.
Well, thank you for all the suggestions. I have made notes because again, it's very helpful. And tomorrow, actually, you were all going to receive that link to our housing element survey, and I was including committees. So, you know, it's like we were going step by step. I just yesterday managed to at least put it on the website. And now now that I have more suggestions, I think it will help us improve.
Also, and ask you one other question here before we go. You were so kind in sending me that map. You know, it's interesting. And I was wondering the map of the underdeveloped parcels. So, you know, there's the current housing element that has a map that's super, super minuscule. And I couldn't find it. So I asked our planning director to send me a PDF so I can zoom in on it. It might be worth sending that to the other commissioners if you haven't done that already.
Sure, I can do that.
Because I don't know, as we're trying to be creative with the housing element, this map is useless in the appendix of the old one. And if you get the electronic copy that she sent me, you can actually zoom in and see maybe something that we all missed. I don't know. I'm trying to be creative here as how we can help be keeping our eyes open on things. Well, with that, if nobody has anything else more to kind of sneak in under the planning director's minute, honestly, this is the best place to talk.
Touche, Brigitte.
Anyway, the Brown Act's going to basically prevent us from having any open discussions. This is the best place to do it. Well, with that, it is lovely to see you guys. It was a very productive, very lively evening. Thank you. And with that, I adjourn the meeting at 9:52 p.m.
Thank you.
12:52 a.m. in some places.
Oh, anyway.
Good morning.
Thank you.
Good night and good morning.
Thank you.
So
Thanks.
much.